Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Caroline walked up the stairs, barely moving her feet. She didn't want to go home. The woman was resentfully silent. Her husband also silently followed her. Caroline kept mentally returning to the meeting with her partners, remembering in what unfavorable light her husband made her look. "Come in." The woman welcomed the two men to the negotiating table. "The agreement on the beginning of our cooperation will come into force today. I have prepared all the necessary documents. We only need to sign them." She, smiling, put a folder in front of each of them. "Look through them carefully. I tried to take into account all your wishes." The men looked at each other. "We don't really understand." One of them spoke up. "Why did you invite us here today? We have nothing more to say to you. All matters have already been settled with your husband. You referred us to him yourself?" "Of course." Patiently, Caroline explained, "I was counting on Hunter to familiarize you with the terms. I think you found them very attractive. This contract is important to our firm, especially to me. After all, I've been working to promote this deal. I don't think there's any impediment to signing. If there are any points that need to be clarified, suggest it. It's not too late to tweak things. Hunter." She turned to her husband, who had been sitting there all this time, saying nothing and pretending that the matter did not concern him. "Why are you silent? We will not sign this contract." Without looking his wife in the eyes and visibly nervous, the man replied sharply, "How not to sign?" Caroline was confused. "Wait, but we had a preliminary agreement. You only had to clarify the details of the deal and agree on the time of signing. What's the problem?" "I have everything prepared, no contradictions. The deal is transparent. I decided that the terms offered to us by potential partners were not favorable to our firm. Why sign a contract if it's unpromising from the start? Why would we invest in a business that's not profitable for us? Gentlemen," one of the men addressed them, "you please agree among yourselves. We would not like to be participants in your family quarrel. I think it's pretty clear. For God's sake, I'm sorry." Caroline addressed them. "There's been a misunderstanding. Let's postpone the signing of the contract, say, for 2 days. I'll prepare a new set of documents, and we'll start working together. My husband and I probably misunderstood each other, but these days of misunderstanding, I'm afraid it won't work." Shook his head one of the representatives. "We have found other companions. My advice to you," rising from his chair, he said, "before inviting partners, you should be able to negotiate among yourselves, or you have a right hand does not know what the left hand does. This attitude is bad for business development. Permission to deviate." The men have left the meeting room. "What was that all about?" Caroline asked, seething. "Why would you do such a thing? Especially behind my back. What right did you have to back out of the deal? Why on earth would you think it was unprofitable? We started working on it a month ago. We were both hoping for a good investment. And now what? All that effort for nothing? I don't want to talk right now." Hunter headed for the exit. "You are annoyed and will not take my arguments properly." "All right," Caroline agreed. "Let's go home. It's really not a good idea to deal with serious matters at the end of the day. But you're not going to be able to keep your mouth shut. I want to know why you changed your mind about the deal." The woman stopped in front of the door to the apartment. Hunter turned the key in the lock. Caroline gladly threw off her business clothes, changed into a house robe, went into the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. "We need to talk." Her husband's tone made the woman wary. "Let's not today." She wrinkled her nose. She didn't feel like talking. "You've already said and done a lot of things. Let's save the explanations for tomorrow." The deal is off anyway, so I think we can talk until morning, and tomorrow I'll calculate how much money we've lost by losing our suppliers. I don't have the energy for this anymore. I want to sleep. My business cannot wait. Hunter insisted. You'll have to listen to me now. Do you want to explain why you embarrassed me in front of potential partners? Caroline squinted at her husband. Go ahead, say it. But don't use the fact that I'm a woman and don't know anything about business as an argument. I don't think you've ever had to question my abilities until recently. I know what our firm needs. You can't dismiss my opinion. I'm not going to explain or apologize. I've made up my mind. That's how you talk. Not so long ago, you couldn't make a move without me. What's changed? Why didn't you talk to me beforehand? Why didn't you tell me you weren't going to make a contract with the buyers? Is that how it's done? Don't you realize you're ruining my reputation and the reputation of the firm? I just haven't had time to tell you. I've had too many problems these past few days. You didn't have time or you didn't want to. Is that what they call it now? How could you not consult me? What kind of demarque is this? We discussed all the details together a week before we signed the contract. What happened in the meantime? Why do I have to justify myself to you? Hunter was angry. I got acquainted with the material offered by these suppliers and realized that they were not suitable. That's why I decided not to cooperate with them. It's business. We will find other, more favorable suppliers. Don't make excuses. You and I are partners, which means I need to know what's going on in the firm. You made me look like a shallow, flighty person who suddenly wanted to take charge, and it was my initiative. When we started the business, you always consulted me. We made every decision together, weighed all the pros and cons of the deal, calculated every step to avoid making mistakes, and succeeded together, which is important. And what do I see today? Why did you allow yourself to put me in such an unpleasant situation? Why go behind my back and change your mind? I feel like an idiot, because there's no changing your mind once you've made up your mind. This deal is a zero-sum deal, and it's a mess. I cared about the firm, not your reputation. You should have talked about it beforehand. So you don't trust me. You doubt my abilities. But since the firm was founded, there hasn't been a single wrong decision I've made. Why are you questioning my competence now? Caroline looked at her husband and could not understand at what point they began to drift apart. She remembered one of the conversations she had had with her mother when they were just about to start their own business. Mom, Hunter, and I have decided to start our own firm. Can you imagine how great that would be? Good, of course, who can argue? Mother said cautiously, but who are you going to register it with? Hunter, of course. He's a man, but we'll invest the money equally. Remember, daughter. Her mother looked at her as if she were an unwise child. You can't put your eggs in one basket. If anything happens between you, God forbid, the firm will go to your husband and you'll be left with nothing. What's going to happen? Caroline hugged her mother. Mommy, Hunter, and I love each other, and we're not getting divorced. If that's what you're implying. Who knows, who knows? Mother answered evasively. Life? Oh, how unpredictable. Well, if you're so worried about me, we can become full partners. That's better, but I think you should have your own business, opened only with your money. A married couple's business together can sometimes lead to strife. Men think we women are incapable of making good decisions. If they had their way, they would not allow us to work at all, but limit our power to the kitchen, the house. My Hunter is not like that. Caroline assured her. They're all the same. Heavy, sighed the mother. Mommy, you're wrong about my husband. He trusts me and always consults me. I'm better at some things than he is. We have nothing to share. I wouldn't be so reckless if I were you, but that's your business." And now Caroline realized what her mother had warned her about, and she wouldn't listen. That's not what I was going to talk about. Her husband brought her out of her reverie. "I'd love a hot bath right now." At that thought, Caroline even closed her eyes. It seemed the day would never end. Her resentment towards her husband was unrelenting. What other unpleasant things was he going to tell me? About what? She looked at him tensely. "Tomorrow, a lot of things are going to change in our lives." "What changes?" "Don't speak in riddles. I want to warn you in advance so that the news doesn't come as a sudden blow to you." "What the hell is going on? Why are you going around and around?" "You're a smart woman." Hunter began in a sneaky way. "So I'm sure you figured it out a long time ago. I have someone else, and for quite some time." Caroline was silent. "I hope you're not going to make a jealous scene. We're adults, and we know how it is sometimes when a husband and wife break up. I suspected, of course, that you had someone else." Caroline spoke with difficulty, overcome with heartache. Her feminine ego was hurt. She was not ready for such a conversation. But I pushed the thought away. "I really hoped that you'd come to your senses, that you'd have a good time, but you'd stay in the family. I can understand you. They say all men cheat on their wives at least once in their lives. Let's consider it a misunderstanding that we should forget, okay?" She smiled, though inside her, a fire was burning, her heart was bleeding. She wanted to get up and hit her husband. "I was fine with life with you," Hunter continued, glancing at his wife. "I wasn't planning to leave, but—" He paused. "A few months ago, Kathy bore me in hair, a son, and you couldn't do it. We'd been dreaming of a child for years, and we'd never been able to do it. And she did. I want to be with her and raise my son. And you know how important that is to me. I hope we'll part peacefully." Caroline closed her eyes. "Her husband was hitting me where it hurts. I thought we were both okay with this situation. You and I have been together for 10 years, and we agreed long ago that the topic of children for us closed forever. There's a lot more to us than a child. We have so much in common. Don't those years mean anything to you? You're just going to ruin our family?" "Remember," Hunter grumbled, "that we've been together since college." "We have. We fell in love at first sight. Don't you remember how we met?" Anyone in my position would have lost their head to a handsome guy with a guitar in his hands. After that, I couldn't imagine life without you. We did everything together. When we got married, we started a business together. Do you remember how we bought our first apartment?" Hunter was silent. Caroline could see how unpleasant this conversation was for him. "And how you dreamed of a car, remember? And we'd bought it. We picked it out together. Our next purchase was a big apartment where we wanted to have a nursery, but we didn't have children. And now you want to destroy everything for the sake of a Flynn?" "Think carefully, Hunter. We've known each other a long time, and that woman you're just getting to know. Are you sure about her? You shouldn't be reminiscing right now. Nothing will change. I've already made up my mind. What kind of man am I if I don't have an heir? If I can't proudly say that the family business will go to my son? I need that child." He hesitated. "And his mother. Our feelings for you have long since faded, and I want something new." "That's what I understand." Caroline said slowly. "I can't change your mind, can I? Do you want to go to that woman?" "Well, that's your right." "No." Hunter paced nervously in the kitchen. "I want you to go." "Go where?" "I don't understand." His wife looked at him puzzled. "What don't you understand?" He asked angrily. "I have a son and hair. We need this apartment. Where will I bring a new family in rented accommodation? How do you envision it? No, tomorrow Kathy and my son are moving here, into my apartment. Wait a minute. Caroline's head is spinning at her husband's insolence. It's not just your apartment, it's ours. We bought it together in equal shares. If you want to live with your mistress, be my guest, I won't keep you. You want a divorce? That's fine. I won't beg you to come back, but everything has to be fair. We have a lot of property that we acquired during our marriage. Legally, I own half of it. I'm not going to give it to your new woman. I'm not a charity. In principle, I'm willing to give you the apartment, but then pay me half of what it's worth. And of course, tomorrow, no more Kathy, much less your child, will be here. Not until I find a new place to live. Besides, I need time to pack. By the way, how are we going to divide the firm? Caroline? Hunter looked hard at his wife. You still don't get it, do you? I'm not going to share anything with you. The firm is in my name. Wrong. The business is shared. Any court would make you pay me half of what you sold it for. And you can't rob me. If you don't want to split it amicably, we'll sue. The apartment, unfortunately, without paying attention to her, continued the husband. It's registered to both of us, but I'm sure I can take it away. You don't need anything. You're single. You have money. What am I supposed to do? Start all over again? My new family can't wait. The money to support them is needed here and now. So I'm sorry, honey. I'm gonna have to give in. You can't do this to me. I'll fight for my share of the estate. For God's sake. Her husband laughed nervously. Only you won't succeed. Get over it. I don't want you in this house or in my life anymore. You're fired on all counts. I've written you off as old age, as waste material. He laughed again. And Kathy tomorrow. He suddenly got serious. She'll move in here as mistress, and you can't stop her from doing it. No one's going to kick a mother and child out of the door, and I won't let them. All right, I'll leave, but I'll get my stuff later when I get an apartment. Caroline saw that it was useless to argue with her husband. He is stronger and probably prepared for the conversation in advance, all calculated and thought out. So she decided to agree with him in everything, just to avoid making him angry. I can't do it now. You realize I need time. You have all night. Relax, Hunter. If you don't pick up your stuff tomorrow, I'll just throw it out to make room for Kathy and change the locks on the apartments so you can't come in unimpeded. That's all. Good night, darling. By the way, I've already filed for divorce. With these words, the man left the kitchen. Caroline looked after her husband in shock. Is this really the Hunter I loved? She thought, tears welling up in her eyes. No, this is a complete stranger. It turns out I didn't know my husband at all. What am I going to do? She was aimlessly writing patterns on the table with a teaspoon. I'm certainly not going to leave you pantsless. I'm going to legally take what's mine. Good. The woman put the documents in a folder. Anything else I wanted to bring? She closed the safe, looked around. These antiques I bought for myself. I don't think Hunter's new girlfriend will appreciate them. Caroline put in her bag a miniature brass coffee maker, a coffee mill, a vintage jewelry box. Let the rest stay. She packed some expensive dishes, wrapped some paintings in cloth. What am I supposed to do with all this? The woman looked thoughtfully at the things she had packed. Perhaps it would be better to take it to the car, she reasoned. I don't know if Hunter will like my choice. She grinned sadly. Hopefully, reason will prevail and we won't have to share forks, spoons, and chairs. Trying not to attract the attention of the neighbors, I carried the packed things into the car. Now it was just a matter of packing my personal belongings. Gloating at the clock, the woman opened the bedroom door and turned on the light. "What are you doing?" shrieked the disgruntled husband, waking up. Sat up in bed, wiped his eyes, glanced at the clock. "Are you crazy? The time is 3 o'clock in the morning. Why did you turn on the light? What do you want here?" "I have to work tomorrow." "Everyone has to work tomorrow, and I'm doing your bidding, darling." Caroline replied nonchalantly. She spread 2 large suitcases on the floor and opened the closet doors. "You told me you'd throw my things away if I didn't pack them by morning. I can't lose my favorite dresses and suits. I'm sorry, you didn't give me any other time." "Couldn't you have waited until morning?" Hunter said irritably, tucking himself back under the blanket. "I won't get any sleep, and tomorrow's a busy day." "Get used to it, dear," the woman said with a sneer. "You will have many sleepless nights ahead of you. Don't forget, you'll soon have a small child living here. You can't imagine the difficulties ahead of you." "I can't wait." She waved her hands. "What if your new wife wants to move in early? So I'm sorry, you left me no choice." "Okay, but can you get ready quickly?" Hunter asked unhappily, seeing Caroline slowly packing her things into her suitcase. "What are you doing?" "Don't rush me. I mustn't forget anything." Smiling to herself, the woman shrugged her shoulders. "For 10 years of happy married life, I have accumulated a lot of things. With what love you bought for me, jewelry, outfits, remember." Finally, the suitcases were packed. Caroline carried them into the car. She looked at her watch and decided, "I could use some sleep, even an hour of shutting my eyes. It would be easier on my head." The woman settled down on the sofa in the living room and tried to sleep, but she was disturbed by the unpleasant conversation with her husband and the collection of things. Sleep did not come. She waited until dawn in a half-slumber, then quickly jumped to her feet, cleaned herself up, and went to work to pick up the documents for the company from her husband's office before the workday began. Caroline, as usual, smiled at the security guard at the entrance. "Good morning, Bob. I thought I'd get an early start to the day. Have you been eating a lot of bleach?" She was surprised when the guard blocked the entrance. "Let me through." "Caroline," the guard was guiltily hiding his eyes. "I can't. Hunter, strictly forbidden to let you into the office. I'm very nice to you, but the boss has threatened to fire you." "I can't lose my job." "I'm sorry, I have a mother and a wife and child on my back. If I lose my job, we'll go to the world. I need you to understand my situation." "Bob." She gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry, please. I'm hurt, of course, but okay, I won't set you up." "Thank you, Caroline." The guy's blushing. "I'm sorry." "Never mind." The woman tried to smile, though she really wanted to cry. "It's our family squabbles. I owe you an apology for being caught between 2 fires. I'm not mad at you. And Hunter is not so stupid," she thought as she walked out of the building. "He made sure I couldn't get into the office in advance. He knew I'd want to get the files. I'm not going to fight with the guard. He's just an enforcer. I don't want to give Hunter an excuse to call the police. I'd rather come back next time, when things have calmed down a bit, talk to Bob. They'll let me through. He's a good guy, and he understands. I picked a bad time, of course. The guy's afraid the chief's gonna show up any minute. That's why he's acting like this. We should come by at the end of the day. We do not have cameras installed, so we can try to negotiate." With those thoughts, the woman got in the car. "Well, we'll have to find a lawyer. We can't do it alone." Caroline said, flipping through the phone book. "As far as I remember, this man is considered the best in civil cases. He doesn't seem to have a single lost case, but his services won't be cheap." She looked around, started the car. "Good thing Hunter doesn't have access to my accounts. I'll pay any money to help solve the property division problem." Well, I'll try calling. I hope he has time for me. Caroline dialed the number for the law firm. Hello. She spoke when she heard a pleasant female voice on the other end of the line. I urgently need to meet your boss. When can he see me? You know, there was some silence on the phone. There's a window in his schedule right now. Can you come over right now? Great, the woman rejoiced. I'm on my way. You're very lucky, the secretary said as Caroline entered the reception area. Samuel has a canceled appointment and will see you personally. She stood up quickly and opened the door. Samuel, the girl announced, you have a visitor. Hello, come in. A handsome middle-aged man, his dark hair neatly trimmed, barely raised his head and deep into his papers again. Dressed neatly, clean-shaven and smelling of expensive perfume, he immediately made a favorable impression on Caroline. Excuse me, I'll be ready to hear from you in a minute. I have a lot of things to do in production. Caroline sat down on a comfortable chair, put her purse on the neighboring one, folded her hands on a good dark wood table, and looked around. There was order in the office, nothing superfluous folders, books, stationery on the desk. Everything was in harmony with the environment and incredibly appropriate to the owner of the office. Am I listening to you? Finally, the lawyer said, raising his brown eyes to her. The case will seem trivial at first glance. Caroline began, slightly worried, but I found myself in a very unpleasant situation. It was inexpressibly embarrassing to admit to such a handsome young man that her husband had left her, but she gathered her strength and spoke. My husband and I have been together for 10 years. We started from scratch together. The only thing that marred our family life, the lack of children, well, did not happen. And now a young fool has seduced my husband, and he threw me out on the street. You want your husband back? The man squinted at her. No, I don't. We are civilized people. We parted peacefully, without breaking dishes and mutual insults. If he thinks they'll be better off with a new wife, for God's sake, I'm not going to interfere. It is noble, though unexpected to hear such a statement from the mouth of a woman. The lawyer hummed respectfully. I see, you decided to take revenge on him, to punish him, to leave him with nothing? I don't need to get my husband back. I don't need to rip him off. I just want what's legally mine. We acquired all of our property after we were married. So 1/2 is mine, right? Here are the documents. You can read them. She put a folder on the table in front of him. I don't need anything extra, just what goes to me in the divorce. By the way, my husband filed for divorce without me. Samuel was silent for a long time, looking at the woman curiously. Caroline couldn't take it anymore. What? She asked, feeling uncomfortable under his gaze. Is something wrong? Why don't you say anything? Are you taking my case? I'm sorry. Samuel grinned and began to study the documents. After a while, he stared at her again. Caroline shivered, not understanding why he was staring at her like that. If you have any questions, ask. I have nothing to hide. I don't want blood. Yes, I'm hurt that my husband did this to me, but I don't want to hurt him. He's probably right. Our relationship is over. We lived together out of inertia, the habit of being close to each other. If you know what I'm talking about, he was probably the first to realize the pointlessness of our relationship. I'm even grateful to him in a way. It's just, she hesitated. The breakup came out of the blue. To be honest, Samuel said slowly, continuing to stare at her. I was expecting to see another trophy wife, eager to steal from an unfaithful husband, young, beautiful, and completely stupid, and here, I'm a little puzzled. You're different. I don't know what you mean. The woman frowned. And stop looking at me. Are you taking my case? If you're interested in details, ask. I'll answer any questions you have. I don't have any questions for you. Everything is clear. Rather, there are questions for your husband, except that he is a fool to let such a woman go. Caroline blushed and looked away. I can't understand at all what he's counting on. The apartment was bought during the marriage. It's jointly owned. I've looked through the documents. Everything is clean. The firm is also very clear. We have to split it up. I don't know what he's counting on. Excuse me, Caroline, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, she nodded. And the money, how do you plan to divide your capital? You haven't said anything about it. We've never shared a budget, so I have my money. The car is in my name too. I don't have a claim on the Hunter. I'm interested in the apartment, the firm, and the summer house. I'll be honest, your cases are easy to win. I will be pleased if you decide to work with me, but with such a case we'll cope with any lawyer, including the one who charges for his services much less than me. You've already asked about my rates, haven't you? Maybe you should go to another law firm. I don't discount my clients, not even pretty ones like you. You see, Samuel, my husband is no fool. Ignoring his compliment, Caroline spoke. This morning I tried to get into the office, but they wouldn't let me in. He strictly forbade the guards to even speak to me, threatening to fire me. I could have demanded permission to go in, but I didn't want to put the guard in an awkward position, and Hunter's just waiting for an excuse to take me down. I'm sure he has some kind of plan. I'm afraid he's going to forge documents related to the firm. I suspect he's already slipped me some papers, and I may have signed them without looking. Don't you check the papers you sign? I've never had any reason not to trust him. We've been working together a long time. We have a family and a business in common, and we both have a vested interest in its success. The woman fell silent, trying to cope with the tears that came to her throat. I can't confirm my guesses either. I don't have access to the office right now. The case, seemingly simple at first glance to you, can turn into a huge showdown, and I would not like that. I'm a peaceful person, used to negotiating, so I'm afraid to be cowardly and back down. Hunter will probably try to take advantage and push pity on me. And I want to get justice and get what's mine in the divorce. Judging by the reviews, have you ever won the toughest case? If I'm gonna go to war with my husband, it's gonna have to be with you. That's why I came to you. Don't worry about the fee. I have the money. You set a price and let's sign the contract. Caroline, I understand your husband asked you to vacate the apartment. Did you get your things out of there? Yes, I took my things. They're in my car. Where do you plan to live? Have you already managed to rent a place to live, or have any of your relatives or acquaintances taken you in for a while? Honestly, I didn't even think about it. The woman was embarrassed. But it doesn't matter. I'll try to go home, maybe. Hunter has already decided not to kick me out of my own apartment. He must have a conscience. Caroline replied, but if he's determined, he'll probably carry out the threat and change the locks. I can't get into the apartment, but that's not a good idea. It's already occupied. I don't want to get into a fight in front of the neighbors. I'll have to find a place to sleep. I'll think of something. Don't you want to go to the police? He'll be obliged to give you back your right to stay in this apartment in no time. Come home with the police and demand to be let in? I don't want to. It's beneath me. It's easier for me to rent. It's not a problem if you have the money. Okay. Samuel put a form and a pen in front of Caroline. Now we'll draw up an application to the court demanding the division of property. Then we'll draw up a partnership agreement between you and me. And I will not put things on hold, and I will study your documents right away. I'll do that. The woman started filling out the paperwork. I also want this to be resolved as soon as possible. Okay. Taking the written sheets from her, the man resolutely held out his keys. And these are for you. What's this? She looked at him uncomprehendingly. These are the keys to my second apartment. Usually friends, colleagues, or my most pleasant clients stay there. Right now the apartment is empty. You can stay there temporarily. I'll write you the address. No. Caroline objected. I can't. I don't want to bother you. I don't want to be obliged. Don't refuse. Samuel stopped her with a gesture. You have a difficult time ahead of you. Let at least one of your problems be solved easily. I really don't need this apartment yet. You can live in it as long as you like until you feel you need to move out. But I'm not comfortable. Look, we're partners now. I'm supposed to help you. Don't say no. I can see that you're very tired and need to rest. You'll find another apartment, but it'll take time. For now, go, take a bath, calm down. Get your mind right. There's no food. You can order something by courier, but there's wine at the bar. If you want something stronger, there's cognac. Don't be shy. Make yourself at home. I really don't feel comfortable burdening you. I'm used to taking care of myself. Caroline felt like she was about to cry. A stranger showed concern for her, and her husband, with whom she had lived for almost 10 years, threw her out of the house like a stray puppy. Please stop apologizing and go. The lawyer quickly wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to her. Here's the address. I'll call you as soon as I get the paperwork to the court to make it easier for you to accept my help. Remember, if you're paying for my work, the apartment is part of the terms of the deal. A nice bonus for hiring me. Are you willing to do that? Thank you. You're very kind to me. I can't even remember the last time a man was so attentive. I'm used to being strong, and I'm used to protecting the weak, though not without benefit to myself. Samuel smiled slyly. The woman smiled back, tears glistening in her eyes. Go and think nothing of it. The truth is on your side. Build up your strength. You'll need a lot of it to endure the legal battle. It's an unpleasant and sometimes quite painful procedure. I've seen it, so I know what I'm talking about. You must present yourself to your husband as a strong, beautiful, confident woman. You can't let it show that this situation has knocked you off your game, that it's interfering with your life. Yeah, I get it. I mustn't get discouraged. Thanks again. Caroline left the office, got into her car. She felt completely exhausted. Don't relax, she ordered herself. Now I'll get to the apartment my lawyer has kindly given me, and I'll rest there. He's right. I could definitely use a rest right now. What an apartment, she exclaimed, half an hour later, entering her new home. It's gorgeous. She looked into the bedroom, into the kitchen. I'm going to order some food from the restaurant, and I'm going to take a bath. I want to rinse off all my troubles as soon as possible. She made the phone call, hummed contentedly when she heard that the order would be fulfilled within half an hour, and headed for the bathroom. She was almost dozing off, relaxing in the hot water, when the doorbell rang. Oops. She quickly jumped up, hastily wiped herself down, wrapped her hair in a towel, threw on a robe, and opened the door. A young man in a uniform smiled at her. Your order. Thank you. Taking the packages, Caroline replied. After seeing the young man off, she went into the kitchen. It turned out that I was hungry. She was surprised to find herself eating a salad. The meat is so tender. I have to stop. Caroline got up from the table and went into the bedroom. This is what I've been missing, she said with pleasure, stretching out from under the blanket. The woman had no sooner closed her eyes than fatigue and worry took their toll, and she fell into a dream. Caroline did not know how many hours she had slept, but when she opened her eyes, she realized that it was already evening. It was dusk outside the window. It felt so good. She stretched and said she would lie here without any problems and worries. Oh, it's evening. I slept through everything. Enough lying around. She jumped to her feet. I should go home, see what's going on. Maybe I shouldn't have done all this. Maybe Hunter's not thinking about getting rid of me. I mean, it's a little crazy in his head. I mean, who knows? I won't judge him if he wants to apologize. We have too much in common. She cleaned herself up, got into the car, and drove home. She stopped at the entrance, looked up, noticed the light in the windows. She went up to the landing, tried to insert the key into the keyhole as usual, but it didn't work. It had changed after all. There was an unpleasant scratching at her soul. Caroline gathered her courage and rang the bell. She stood listening. Strange, the light was on, so someone must be home. There was silence at the door. She knocked gently at first, then insistently. No one answered. Then Caroline began to ring again. Finally, the door opened. A young woman appeared on the threshold. Her blonde hair was loose, her lipstick was brightly colored, and long, unnaturally fluffy eyelashes framed her brown eyes. The makeup disfigured her delicate face rather than adding beauty. A silk robe barely covered her slender legs. What do you want? Despite her fragile appearance, the stranger's voice was rough, displeased. She smokes, too. Caroline's mind flashed. Didn't anyone ever tell you that if people don't answer the door, they don't want to see anyone? And you calling and waking up my kid, who are you? Hello. I want to see Hunter. Send him in. Trying to remain calm, Caroline asked politely. Aha, a stranger's guess. You're Hunter's ex. He's not here, and I don't know when he will be. Kathy tried to close the door. I don't think he'll want to talk to you anyway. I think you've got it all figured out. Then I'll wait for him. I need to talk to him. You can't stop me. Caroline held the door. Let me into the apartment. In case you didn't know, half of it is mine. I have every right to be in it. You have no business being here. Kathy pulled on the door again. Hunter said you're not getting anything out of this apartment. Now, this is my house. I decide who I let in here. Okay, I'm sorry. I overreacted. Caroline tried to smooth things over. Tell me when he's coming back and I'll leave. I don't know when Hunter's coming back. You're not going to stay here all night, are you? Go away or you'll really wake up your son. If you don't leave me alone, I'll tell Hunter and he'll deal with you. Don't think you're going to get my sympathy. I know my rights. You're the one who's screaming like a victim right now. Caroline said calmly, so you don't have to put your head on straight. It won't be long before all the neighbors will come to see us fighting. You don't want the neighbors to know we're fighting, do you? I don't care about the neighbors. Get out. I don't have time to talk to you. My husband will be home from work. I have to get ready. He's so insatiable in bed. Kathy laughed. How would you know, though? The passion between you two is long gone. Hunter complained that you didn't satisfy him at all. Let's not discuss our bedtime affairs, shall we? Caroline blushed. I'll go. Just help me satisfy my feminine curiosity. She looked questioningly at her rival. Don't worry, I'm not going to interfere with your happiness. Just answer one question. Okay, ask. The hell with you. Anyway, after all, do not get off. How old is your son? 8 months old. Kathy answered. What's your business? She looked suspiciously at the uninvited guest. Are you up to something? It's not going to work, okay? Hunter stays with me. Forget about him. How can you compete with me? I'm young and beautiful, and you're already used up. Sure, I get it. Calm down. I'm not going to interfere with my ex-husband's new marital happiness. If you'll excuse me, I have one more question. Why are you two getting married now? Not right after your son was born, but only 8 months later? What were you waiting for? Don't you get it? I love Hunter, so I didn't want to pressure him. He couldn't make up his mind to talk to you. Do you have any idea what it's cost me to wait? But why rush things? I'm not a beast. I gave him time to gather his strength. I knew he wouldn't go anywhere. He'd marry me sooner or later. Look at yourself from the outside, and you'll understand why Hunter chose me. Admit it, you decided to push him a little bit, blackmail him, scare him that you'd leave him, didn't you? Cut him off from your son, am I right? That's your style. So what? Yeah, I gave you an ultimatum. I move out of your apartment by the end of the week, or I move back in with my mom. I'd had enough of the movie house, but then he'd never see his son again, and what was I supposed to do? I'm sick of it. I need certainty, and my son a father, and I was also afraid that he was scared and changed his mind about divorcing you. After all, after 10 years, people get to know each other, and your tricks worked on him right away. He got all excited and made concessions to you right away. Well, you see, you know all about it. Kathy grinned. You've already asked more than 2 questions. I don't have time to talk to you. Get out of here if you don't want to get in trouble, and you will when Hunter gets here. Why are you so nervous? Caroline let go of the door and headed for the elevator with a parting glance. I get the impression that you're not very confident about tomorrow. You see, it's long been proven that once betrayed, betrayed again. I'd think about it if I were you. One day Hunter will see not only your body, but your soul as well. I'm sure he won't like it. Don't scare me, I'm scary. Forget the way here, shouted Kathy to Caroline's back. You don't have a husband anymore. He's mine and mine alone. It's your own fault. You should have had a child. Then he wouldn't look at any woman, and you couldn't. So I'm sorry, move over. What can you do? There aren't enough rich men for everyone. But you too, as far as I know, you didn't miss a beat. And I can keep him. Don't worry about that. The woman was awakened by the phone ringing. Caroline? She heard Samuel's voice on the phone. I've filed the papers with the court. The first hearing is scheduled for next week. Thank you. In a voice hoarse from sleep, the woman spoke. Hunter, the subpoena has been sent. Be prepared for all sorts of surprises and even provocations. Not at all, she smiled. Hunter is not capable of that. I wouldn't be so sure. He betrayed you. A man who has tried to take away a piece of property will do anything to defend it. He's got something to fight for. I don't think he'd make such draconian terms himself. This shows the hand of the mistress. I spoke to her. Why? So you can piss Hunter off and complicate the property division process. I hadn't thought of that, but he didn't call with a claim. Maybe Kathy didn't tell him I was coming. We'll see, but we can't relax. The week went by without a hitch. Caroline showed up at the courthouse. Don't worry. Samuel took her hand reassuringly. You have nothing to worry about. Now the court will hear the parties and make a decision. I don't understand. Why isn't Hunter here? Caroline was nervous. We have a few minutes. Stand up. Court is now in session. The clerk announced, and the judge entered the courtroom with a decisive step. The court is adjourned due to the defendant's failure to appear. She announced, What does that mean? Perplexed, Caroline asked the lawyer. It means that your husband decided to delay the process, but it's not a problem. He still has nowhere to go, whether he wants to or not, and have to share. It's just gonna take longer. What am I supposed to do? The woman looked at Samuel frustrated. All you can do is wait. You have a place to live. You don't need money, so rest. As they say, there's a silver lining. When else is there gonna be a good time when you don't have to think about work? Do you remember the last time you went on vacation? We were planning to go somewhere with Hunter. Caroline smiled sadly. We travel every year together, and now, that's great, Samuel exclaimed, encouragingly looking at her. Go away, get a change of scenery. It will do you good, at least for a couple of days. I wish it were over as soon as possible. I'm very uncomfortable with you, Samuel. I've overstayed my welcome. You've given me a temporary home, but it's dragging on. Caroline, what are you talking about? Wouldn't you help me if I were in this situation? You're not just a client to me anymore. You've become a real friend to me. The man looked intently into the woman's eyes. She was embarrassed and looked away. Don't think about anything. We have everything under control. Have you decided where you're going? Yes, I'm going to a friend's country house. That's great. Take a rest and don't think about anything. Remember, I'm in charge of your problems now, and Caroline went to the country. The weekend flew by, but the woman really felt that she was ready to continue to stand up for her rights. And even from a distance, she felt Samuel's support. A week later, she walked back into the courtroom. Hunter is here, Samuel reported, and in good spirits. I would like to believe that today's meeting will be the end of it. Hunter entered the room, accompanied by his lawyer. The judge has taken her seat. Court is now in session. The clerk announced, a civil case on the division of the property of the spouses is being heard. The plaintiff's lawyer voiced his demands. Hunter, I would like to hear what you do not agree with the position of the applicant. Judging by the documents, the property was acquired during the marriage, so each spouse claims half of it. No factors influencing the denial of claims were presented. The documents are duly executed. I do not understand why there are difficulties. Honorable Court. Hunter stood up, coughed. Maybe, according to the law, my wife has the right to a part of the apartment, dacha, but she is alone, and I have a family and hair. I expect the Honorable Court to take this fact into account. Why does Caroline need the apartment? Who can she bequeath it to? To someone else's uncle, to her lover? I don't want the property we've built up together to go to San Alfonso. I admit that Caroline will have a man who will not mind to lay his hands on her inheritance, and I will be able to properly manage, including her part of the property, so that she does not become a hostage of some scoundrel. Hunter, the court is not interested in your family problems. We are bound by the law, and the law requires you to either give Caroline the property or pay monetary compensation. You don't want to understand me. Hunter argued, why should I give anything to my ex-wife? She has enough money to buy whatever apartment she wants. It's not my fault she couldn't bear me a child. Can you imagine how a man feels when he's disinherited? I waited 10 years to hold my son in my arms. He blushed with excitement. And now this has happened. Yes, she owes me for the wasted years, and you're obliged to honor my protest. I am, you might say, Samuel, she turned to the lawyer. The application states that your client has a common business with the defendant. Yes, Samuel stood up. The couple started this business together, right after their marriage. The defendant, as soon as he filed for divorce, cut off his ex-wife's access to the office. My client lost her part of the business, thus her source of income. I demand an explanation from the defendant. If I may, Honorable Judge, Counselor Hunter, I'll make things a little clearer. My colleague apparently, he nodded his head in the direction of Samuel, does not have reliable information. Caroline gave her share to Hunter. Here, Honorable Court. He placed the documents in front of the judge. It says here that Sebastian Clark is currently the co-owner, and Caroline has nothing to do with the firm. Since she is already my client's ex-wife, she is not allowed to enter the office. The defendant has every right, at her discretion, to impose bans on the office as it is private property. But it can't be. Caroline jumped up from her seat. I didn't sign any papers. Hunter? She turned to her husband in confusion. Did you forge my signature? No way, dear. Hunter replied gloatingly. I would never go for it. And why would I? You yourself signed to give up your share of the business, and I, as a manager, appointed Sebastian as a co-owner instead of you. Any graphology test will confirm the authenticity of the documents. I'm sorry if you forgot that you resigned. That's not my problem. You're such a scoundrel, the woman exclaimed in her heart. You tricked me into signing the papers. I couldn't sign them of my own free will. You're lying. Did you hear that, Madam Justice? Hunter's voice was hysterical. She insulted me. I request that this be entered into the record. I demand that she be fined. She insulted me in front of witnesses. Now do you understand why I left her? She's been known to blame me for all her problems before. Sit down. The judge yelled at him and forced him down on the chair with a look. And you? She gave Caroline a warning look. I'm issuing a warning. Just a warning? Hunter jumped up again. You think she can humiliate me in front of strangers and only get a warning? I'll complain. I won't let it go. I know my rights. I'm reprimanding you. The judge gave the man a stern look. If you don't stop being hysterical, I'll have you removed from the courtroom. Samuel? She turned to the lawyer in a steady voice. Do you have anything to say about this? My client claimed she didn't sign any such documents. I have no reason not to trust her. So I'm requesting a graphology test. Caroline suspects that her signature may have been fraudulently obtained. Caroline? The judge had no right to sympathize with any of the participants in the trial, and yet the woman thought she saw a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. What do you have to say on this matter? Your Honor. Caroline was confused. I couldn't sign these papers of my own free will. To start a joint business, it was my idea. We've been developing our firm together all these years. It's my only source of income. Voluntarily handing over your share is like chopping off your right hand. Did you ever plan on handing over control of the firm to your husband? Well, yes. The woman recalled that a few months ago, Hunter urged her to sign the deeds over to him. There was a conversation, but I declined. I thought it was strange that he insisted on it, but I had no idea that he would take advantage of my gullibility. He was probably already planning to put me out of business, just waiting for the right opportunity. Well, the judge looked around the room. We are adjourned. The plaintiff's request for a graphological examination is granted. She struck the gavel, announcing that the session was over. Everyone in the room filed out of the room. You can't prove anything anyway. Hunter smirked. The apartment and the summer house didn't work out, but you won't get the firm, and you don't know when you'll get the compensation. I will slow down its payment as much as possible. Turns out you can be sneaky. Too bad I only got a real look at you now. Caroline replied to his lunge. Don't be discouraged. Samuel tried to calm her down. We'll fight again. No, Samuel. Caroline felt completely defeated. It's not going to work. Hunter had probably slipped the documents he needed into the pile of papers he'd had to sign lately. It's my own fault for not looking. I always trusted him like I trusted myself, and now I'm paying the price. We can't prove I did it by mistake. It's my signature, there's no doubt about it. He wouldn't be so brazen if he wasn't sure. Who is Sebastian? Samuel asked. Where did he come from? He's a friend of Hunter's. Wasn't he surprised that you signed over your part of the business to him? We don't know how Hunter explained my decision to him. Caroline noted. He probably doesn't even know that he's unwittingly become an accomplice in our fight. Today I saw another Hunter, and this one is capable of any meanness. They went to their cars. Caroline, how would you like to go to a coffee shop? Have a cup of coffee, discuss our next move. I'd like that. The woman was pleased. Frankly speaking, I don't want to be alone now. Your support is very important to me. They stopped at a cafe, sat down at a table, ordered coffee. Samuel, maybe. To hell with this firm. I don't want to keep litigating. I'm tired of it, and it's embarrassing. Hunter will pay me back the money for the apartment and the summer house, so I won't be on the street anymore. I don't want to see him anymore. I want to forget that life and start from scratch. As for the business, I can organize a new one. I'm not used to it. I was never a kept woman. We were equal partners. I have a lot of ideas in my head. I have the strength, and I don't need anything else. Of course, it's not easy to start from scratch, but I'm a strong woman. Caroline, Samuel admired her. Why don't we use the first name? I don't mind. The woman smiled. The young people jokingly clinked their cups, cementing a new round of relations. Having finished their coffee, they went outside and sat down on a bench. Honestly, I've long wanted to offer you to complete the case. Although, you know, for the sake of your happiness, I'm ready for a lot. And if necessary, we'll finish the job. Though I realize there's little chance of justice. Alas, we have no witnesses who can testify that Hunter deliberately wanted to take your firm away from you. I don't think he discussed his plans with anyone, unless it was his mistress, and she wouldn't give him up. Why chop down the tree you're sitting on? But I'm not gonna give up. Your husband has overstepped his bounds. You see, some circumstances have come up. It's not just business. He hesitated. It took me a long time to decide to tell you, but I have to. I can't keep silent any longer, and you'll find out someday, but I'd rather do it now. Maybe the blow won't be so hard. What else? Caroline asked anxiously. I thought that nothing could be worse than to lose a well-promoted business. What other problem has come over my head? Have you noticed any unhealthy atmosphere around you lately? Anything strange? People treating you differently? Maybe they've been asking strange questions? Think back. No, Caroline said, confused, feverishly going over the recent events in her memory. Well, yes, she remembered. For some reason, my friends started avoiding me as if I were a leper or had borrowed money from them and didn't want to pay it back. Money's off the table, so that leaves lepers. You know something about that? Your husband, he was silent for a moment, trying to find the right words. He's spreading vicious rumors about you. About me? The woman marveled. But there is nothing in my life for which I should blush. Oh, you underestimate your ex-husband. And what are these rumors? Samuel frowned, not sure where to begin. Samuel, don't be stalling. I'll find out anyway. Not today, but tomorrow. Why did my friends start avoiding me? I've been wondering that myself. I somehow tried not to pay attention to their strange behavior, especially since I didn't care about it at all. Hunter tells every corner the story that you cheated on him at the beginning of your life together. I cheated? Is he sick? No, no one would believe that. He had no reason to question my fidelity. As you can see, there are those who believe it, but that's not all. He accuses you of not having children because you allegedly got pregnant by your lover to cover up the sin, had an abortion, and that's the reason for your infertility. But that's utter nonsense. Caroline gasped in shock. It was nothing like that. He's the first and only man I've ever been with. Why would he want to spread rumors about me? I don't understand. He knows better than anyone what I've been through, where I've been, what doctors I've seen. They say it's just the way it is, but I've always been faithful to him, and tears came to the woman's eyes. She suddenly turned to Samuel, took his head in her palms, looked intently into his eyes for a minute, then kissed him hard. Caroline, I'm all for it, but Samuel stared at her uncomprehendingly. Don't you want to explain yourself? Thank you. She smiled, letting him out of her arms. You've just opened my eyes. I never thought I'd be able to use my most potent argument against Hunter, but now I've lost all my doubts. I'm going to fight with his methods. What are you doing? Isn't it dangerous? Can I help? Tomorrow I'll meet with Hunter, and we'll finish this whole story, and then we'll start a new one with you. I don't really know what's going on, of course, but I like your attitude. Samuel took her hand. Were you being serious about us just now? Yes, Caroline answered simply. You've become really important to me, and you're the only one who has stood by me and who I can trust right now. So why don't we go to my place? The woman saw the passion in the man's eyes. Not this time. Caroline smiled guiltily at him. I have to get ready for my meeting with Hunter. I think it will be painful for him. With these words, she got up. Walk me to my car, please. It's been a long day. I need to get my thoughts in order and be alone. Everyone got into their cars. Caroline arrived at the apartment, found a folder with documents among her things, sat on the sofa in the living room, went through the papers. She sat with the folder in her hands for a while, then stood up, shoved it into her bag, and dialed her husband's number. Hunter, we need to meet tomorrow. What do you want from me? He asked rudely. Are you hoping I'll give you your firm back? You can't. It's mine alone. You've had enough of what you got. There's nothing more to talk about. I have another life. I want to forget about you forever. Calm down. The woman wrinkled her nose. I'm not going to sue you for anything more. Then there's no reason to meet. I don't want to waste time on empty conversations. You're already nothing to me, and in general, do not you allow the idea that I just do not want to see you. It's bad enough I'm seeing you in court. Believe me, it's important to you first of all. Caroline assured me. Come to our place. I'll be waiting. Believe me, I wouldn't distract you from your family concerns if it wasn't serious. All right, Hunter grumbled. We'll see what you're going to take me away from my work, but I know you like the back of my hand, and you're not going to win me over. I'm not gonna convince you of anything, just talk to you. I repeat, it's in your best interest. I won't keep you long, don't worry. She hung up and went into the bathroom. She stood under the hot shower for a long time, as if trying to wash away the remnants of a hard day. Sleep overcame her as soon as she closed her eyes. The next day, Caroline sat on a bench in a small park, under a huge lilac bush, and waited for Hunter. This had once been their spot. She spotted him from afar and waved. What? He asked, stopping in front of her. The meeting place wasn't chosen by chance, was it? Are you trying to trigger an old memory in me? Don't try, it won't work. No. Caroline shook her head. You think too much of yourself. It's just that there aren't too many people here, so we can talk in peace. You're not trying hard enough. You're my unfortunate past, only now I'm truly happy. I have the woman I love and the son I've dreamed of all these years. Understand, you have no chance to negotiate with me. For the sake of my child's future, I am capable of many things, even forgery, but you will not be able to prove anything. It's a shame you're acting like a narcissistic egomaniac. Greed and spite have shot your eyes. You've completely forgotten that I have nothing to do with the woman you painted in my guise. But I have not come to appeal to your conscience. Your family life has put it too firmly to sleep. But it matters not. I came to give it to you. She held out a folder of papers. Here. What's this? He asked suspiciously. Remember, about 5 years ago, we were at the clinic for a checkup. About your infertility. Yes, we took the tests together. The woman put the folder on the bench next to her. That's the way it's done, to find out who's having problems. I remember the doctor said it was because of you. We can't have children. We had more treatments, but it didn't work. Yeah, I remember all that well. But why are we having this conversation now? I lied to you then. Caroline answered calmly. There. She nodded at the papers. It's all written. I just loved you too much. Anyway, I wasn't the one with the problem. You were the one with the problem. You're the one who can't have kids. You're infertile. Are you kidding me? That can't be true. The doctors said with one voice that you're infertile and they can't help you. They said that at my request. I couldn't let you feel guilty. I didn't want to humiliate your manhood. I was willing to take on the burden of responsibility. I did it all for you, for your peace of mind. At the time, I thought the sacrifice was worth it. No, I don't believe you. And I have proof, my son. If I am barren, then whose is it? That's a question I think you should ask your new wife. Caroline shrugged. And study the documents at your leisure. I have no interest in deceiving you. Do you want to go to the clinic we went to? We still have the medical records. That's all I wanted to tell you. You see, you were wrong to be afraid. Our meeting was short-lived. She rose from the bench and walked slowly down the alley. Hunter looked at the folder in horror. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. She's on purpose for me, slipping this to me now, jealous of my happiness. My boy, my Jordan, no one can take him away from me. Distrust my wife, my Kathy. He took the folder with shaking hands, sat down on the bench, and opened it. No, no, the man repeated in desperation, leafing through the medical documents. Not true. Why did she keep silent for so many years? It turns out that it's my fault. Is it because of me that we didn't have children? I'm the one who's infertile? Is there such a thing? He groaned in impotent rage, threw the folder away, papers flying around, clutched his head, started rocking from side to side, repeating, It can't be, it can't be. I don't believe it. Why did she take all the blame? Why? And I'm a fool. I've been reproaching her all my life. God, what a fool I am. Hunter didn't know how long he sat like that. Then he woke up, put the certificates neatly into a folder, got up and walked down the alley to his car. He felt dizzy. His eyes were hazy. The man got into the car, started it, and drove off. He drove the car, circling aimlessly around the city. Finally, his eyes fell on the sign bar, turned off the engine, and entered the hall. Vodka 200. He tossed the bartender a drink and sat down on a stool. Can I help you? The young man put the glass in front of him, looking sympathetically at the man. No. Hunter waved his head negatively, draining the contents of the glass. No one can help me. Do you understand? He stared at the bartender with cloudy eyes. I just found out I can't have children. I understand. What do you understand? The man lunged at him. I'm not a man. It's a judgment. Life is over for me. Pour some more. He moved an empty glass to the young man. You think I'm the only one. The main thing is to have a loving wife and children. They can be adopted. How many of them are brought up in orphanages? As far as I know, it's not hard to do. I don't want someone else's. I've always dreamed of my own, and I blame my wife that she can't give me an heir. And she hid the fact that I was infertile. Can you understand? Everyone was pointing fingers at her, and she took the blame, took care of me, protected my male ego, and me. I cheated on her. Can you believe that? I cheated on her because I was excited about being a father. A noble woman, said the bartender, filling Hunter's glass again. What the hell do I need her nobility for? The man drank the glass in one gulp. You can't understand how I feel right now, right here. He pounded his chest with his fist. I'm crushed. He pressed the bridge of his nose with his fingers. Then he slammed his fist down on the tabletop. The glass bounced and clinked pitifully. Will you calm down, please? The young man looked warily at the visitor and took the glass from him. It's not a fatal diagnosis, they live with it. But for me, it's death. With drunken, bloodshot eyes, he looked at the bartender. Because now I have a wife, a new wife, and a son waiting for me at home. So your diagnosis is wrong? No, the diagnosis is correct. I've studied the test results. There's a mistake waiting for me at home, and I need to fix it. Hunter threw the money on the table and staggered out of the bar. He got to his apartment and rang the doorbell. Are you crazy? Kathy jumped on him indignantly. You know Jordan's asleep right now. Where are your keys? Are you drunk? Oh, you bastard. Why are you drunk? Why are you so happy? And let you come into the house like that? Yes, I'm drunk. Hunter woke up, pushed her aside, and entered the hallway. Jesus, your son should see you now. My son? Hunter laughed bitterly. He can't be my son. How dare you say such a thing? Kathy was outraged. What's the matter with you? You're not yourself. Go sleep it off. I'm out of my mind because you shamelessly deceived me. Me? The woman was staring at him. What are you trying to accuse me of? Go to the bedroom. Tomorrow we'll talk to you. Speak. Hunter pinned her against the wall. Whose baby did you slip me? Admit it, bitch. I'll find out anyway, and then there'll be no mercy. You're hurting me. Kathy shrieked. What kind of insulting innuendo is that? How can you suspect me of anything? He's your son. You know how much I love you, don't you? I don't want anyone but you. I don't believe you. Hunter went into the living room without undressing. Why are you mad at me? The woman cried. What have I done wrong? If I've done something wrong, tell me. Just spare me your suspicions. I never cheated on you. I don't need to. That I willingly believe, agreed suddenly Hunter. Because you were afraid I'd throw you out with your brat, because you've gotten him, even before you got me. You've got it all figured out. You set your nets, and I fell for it like a fool. You're out of your mind. I don't want to hear this nonsense. Kathy wanted to leave, but Hunter grabbed her arm and yanked her toward him. You're not going anywhere until you tell me whose baby it is. At least I have a right to know who his daddy is. Yes, it's yours, the woman shouted desperately. The fruit of our love. Don't you remember how excited you were when I told you I was expecting a baby? That minute you were ready to carry me in your arms, and now you're accusing me of I don't know why. Oh, I get it. She suddenly calmed down and spoke softly. You're pissed off about the divorce and the property division. You're on edge. I'm even willing to forgive you for getting drunk. Let's both of us calm down now. You go to bed, and tomorrow we'll talk. There was a baby crying in the nursery. Your son is awake. It's not my son. Don't you dare call him my son. What are you talking about? Of course he's yours. I can't have children. I'm infertile. Infertile how? Kathy asked in confusion. You said Caroline had some health problems, but you're fine? Yeah, that's what I thought. Turns out it was my fault we didn't have children. Maybe it's a mistake. You know, doctors make mistakes sometimes. Or is this your ex-wife's way of getting back at you for cheating on her? There's no mistake. Hunter sank down tiredly on the couch and handed her a folder with documents. Here are the test results. I'm sterile. Caroline kept it from me for my own peace of mind. And you took advantage of the situation and forced another man's baby on me. Why would you do that? I loved you so much. I destroyed my world for you. I thought, this is my happiness, but it turned out, warmed on his chest, ungrateful bitch. I did everything for you, kicked your wife out of the house, and you don't even have the courage to admit to me that you cheated on me. I wonder when you were going to tell me Jordan wasn't mine. Wouldn't it be fun if your lover showed up on your doorstep one day and said, son, I'm your daddy? You know how a man feels when he's been cheated. Tell me, asshole, who's Jordan from? At least do the honorable thing now. You know I have enough money to find out the truth, but then don't expect any mercy. Tell me, I'm giving you one last chance, or I'll throw you out on the street with him right now. Don't expect to appeal to my conscience. I lost everything when I was mean to Caroline. Yes, Kathy, who had already seen the documents and realized she couldn't get out of confessing, decided to open up. It's not your baby, and I don't love you. Are you happy now? I don't want to see you and your son anymore. Slowly rising, Hunter said. Kathy backed away. The man looked creepy. I'm going to leave now, and in the morning when I come back, I want your spirit out of my house. The child, it's not his fault he has such a mean mother, so for the first time I'll give you some money so you can get settled. It's the only thing you can count on, and thank God, I didn't file a police report on you for fraud. You're dead to me. Hunter left, slamming the door loudly. In the nursery, Jordan was crying. Kathy rushed to him, took him in her arms soothingly and cried, Oh my God, I'm such a fool. Everything turned out so wonderfully, Hunter didn't even question that it was his baby. And now what? Where will I go with my son? Back to my mom. I can't believe it's all fallen apart. She calmed her son, put him in his crib, and went to the bedroom. Suddenly, the phone rang. Hunter? Overjoyed, Kathy grabbed the receiver. What's up, girlfriend? She heard the mocking voice of Kelly, whom she had been friends with since high school. It's me. Hi. The woman snickered. I thought it was Hunter. Did you two have a fight? Not just a fight. He demanded I get out of his house. She cried. I'm desperate. I have nowhere to go. But why did he do that to you? You had such a tender love. I was even jealous and the child. You've been telling me that Hunter was crazy about Jordan, that he had no children by his first wife. He gave up his hair? Bastard. I didn't see that coming. That's the point. Kathy cried. He found out Jordan wasn't his son. What? Not his son? Kelly was surprised. Then whose is it? Wait, is it John? You motherfucker. What was I supposed to do? We were together for so long, and then Hunter showed up. You think I could have missed him? I mean, he's a very wealthy man. He's got his own big business. What do you take from John? Wait, I don't get it. You dated them at the same time. What's the big deal? Kathy shrugged. I loved John, and I kept Hunter as a backup, so he came in handy. When I got pregnant, I thought John would be happy. We'd be together. He'd propose. I even dismissed the fact that he wasn't rich. We'd work something out together, and he refused to have a son, said he didn't want to be a burden. It was too late to get an abortion, and Hunter, he talked about in hair so often that I didn't hesitate to tell him about the baby, and he believed it. John disappeared from my life, and then I was all over Hunter. I didn't even have to convince him of anything, and he believed it was his. Of course, what else could he do? He'd been dreaming of an heir for 10 years, and now he was so lucky. For my sake, he divorced his wife and took away her company, and everything was going well for me, if it were not for his wife, who after 10 years decided to confess to her husband in the forgery of documents. He's sterile, he can't have children. Oh shit, Kelly cursed. What now? Did he kick you out? He won't forgive me. Kathy was silent, swallowing her tears. He told me to get out of his apartment. I don't know, what am I supposed to do? Where will she go with him now? I hate that Caroline, she ruined all my plans. If Hunter can't have kids, let him adopt Jordan. Talk to him, cry to him, see if it works. Won't he forgive you? He needs an heir anyway, and with you and your baby, he loves you. Now I don't know how stupid I am. It's a joke. Stop crying. Wait till morning. Can't you seduce a man? Wait for him. Meet him in nice lingerie, set the table. I don't have to tell you how to please a man, do I? I'm sure you can win him back. Why am I so unlucky? John ran out on me, now Hunter. What's wrong with me? Don't worry, girlfriend. It's not over yet. I don't know. You should have seen him. He was so drunk and pissed off. Stop whining. It's the morning after. Get a grip on yourself. Take pity. Men love defenseless women. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. It wasn't until late that night that Caroline reached home. She parked the car and headed for her apartment. Not reaching the driveway, she slowed her step, noticing Samuel on the bench, a huge bouquet of white roses lying next to him. "What are you doing here?" she asked as the man stepped up to meet her. "Somehow I was sure you would be sad after talking to Hunter. I decided to come and support you." He handed her the flowers. "You are an amazing woman. I never cease to admire you. So much stamina, so much patience, human dignity." Samuel looked at her tenderly. "I've never met a woman like you." "Thank you very much." "Yeah, you're right. I'm really sad. You know, it was really hard for me to put an end to my relationship with Hunter, 10 years together. But now I'm at ease. I'm rid of the shadows of the past. Fate has put everything in its place. Evil is punished. I am no longer interested in my husband's new family. Do not hurt his attitude to me. I am glad that my life has changed so abruptly recently. I don't regret anything because you are next to me." Caroline hugged the man tightly, which means that now everything will be fine.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, is rightly considered the tourist pearl of this country. Every year it attracts more and more tourists. Located on the banks of the Kura River, this city has a special charm that has attracted the hearts of people from all over the world. Here and the family of the famous businessman Stephen Otis went on a joint trip to the capital of Georgia. Staying in a beautiful hotel near the mountains, the Otis family has always been an example of prosperity and harmony. Stephen was happily married to his first university and loved Adriana for over 20 years. The businessman's wife was a talented artist and was busy raising 3 children. The eldest was 18-year-old Nancy, the middle was 16-year-old Christopher, and the youngest was Princess Molly, who was barely 6 years old. Stephen and Adriana were not only loving parents, but also loyal friends to their children. They spent a lot of time together, traveling, visiting museums and theaters. There was an atmosphere of love, respect, and support in the Otis home. Every evening, the family gathered in their large two-story apartment. Around the big table, they shared all the news and plans for the future. The spouses taught their children to appreciate labor, to be responsible and kind. Nancy, Christopher, and Molly grew up confident and ready for adulthood. The Otis family was happy and grateful to fate for giving them such wonderful children and a faithful friend in the form of a husband. They knew that together they could overcome any difficulties and achieve any goals. In one of the family evenings in the Otis dining room, they decided how to spend their vacation and where to go to languish in Moscow. All summer, nobody had a desire to go. They thought for a long time, and each of the adult members of the family offered different options. Nancy wanted to fly to Dubai, Christopher to Israel. Parents wanted to go somewhere closer to Abkhazia, Georgia, or Dagestan. Ma started to object. Adriana. Christopher, but what Dagestan? There's practically nothing to do there. What's interesting there? Fortresses, mosques, nature. The woman listed. Sightseeing is not enough for you. That's not interesting. I liked my dad's suggestion to go to Georgia. I supported my parents' wish. Nancy, there's a lot to see there. How do you know? Asked my sister Christopher. You're not gonna believe what I Googled. Showed her brother her phone with the results of Georgia's query. See what? You didn't even think to monitor all the suggestions. I'm gonna look too. Pull out your phone and make the necessary inquiries, said Christopher. And I'll tell you if I'm in for Georgia. You have 5 minutes to vote, said Stephen, and started the stopwatch on his wristwatch. Let's go, Tanishka, and I will clear the table in the meantime. 5 minutes later, the older children decided to agree to the trip to Georgia. It remained only to think over the route, where to fly to, and what cities to visit. In the end, Otis decided to fly to Tbilisi to devote 2 weeks of their trip to visit all the most cozy corners of the original and interesting city. They rent a car and set off on the Tel Aviv route. Signal Kaketi, ancient cave town of Pluls. Scheme. When the Otis family prepared the necessary documents, settled all the things in the business, booked tickets, and collected the necessary things for travel and rest, little Molly did not forget to bring along her favorite toys. Their flight was due in the early morning, so they woke up before dark and headed to the airport. Upon arrival, they went through check-in and security check, after which they went to board the plane. When they boarded the plane, they were greeted by friendly flight attendants who helped them find their seats and explained the safety rules. Soon the plane took off, and the Otis began their journey in the sky. During the flight, some slept, some looked out the window, and some watched movies and played games. But all Christopher, Molly, and Stephen with Adriana were enjoying the food that the stewards were offering. Little Molly enjoyed watching the clouds and marveling at the beauty of the earth from a bird's eye view, actively commenting to her daddy. What does she see? So, has the Stephen family spoken? We are back on solid ground and more exciting adventures await in the future. Hooray! The rest of the family shouted with glee as they passed the beginning of their journey with cheers of joy. From the airport, Otis went straight to the hotel, where they rented 4 rooms for 2 weeks and every day made trips to the city for excursions. The whole family noted that in Tbilisi, modernity harmoniously combines with historical heritage, creating a unique atmosphere. Tourists enjoyed visiting ancient fortresses, temples, and monasteries, which reminded of the past of Georgia, and with no less pleasure viewed modern skyscrapers, shopping centers, and entertainment complexes, which made life in the capital of Georgia convenient and comfortable. Walking along the streets of Tbilisi, Nancy photographed the bright and colorful facades of houses decorated with folk ornaments and stucco. Stephen and Adriana appreciated the old town, where the famous northern baths, built in the 17th century and still popular with locals and visitors, are located. Christopher and Molly were most impressed by the Kura River embankment, where they were able to enjoy the beautiful views of the river and the city, and most importantly, to try Georgian cuisine in one of the many restaurants located on the embankment. When the city sights were over, the Otis family decided to go to the mountains to get a bird's eye view of Tbilisi. Nancy, who didn't want to go for fear of ruining her manicure and tearing things, had to be persuaded the longest. But Mama went back to begging Nancy, "Can't you spend your leisure time in a civilized way?" "What do you call civilized?" Adriana asked her daughter to sit in the room or sleep on the phone, to go down to the table only. "You're exaggerating again, Mom," sighed Camille. "Civilized. It's city tours, museums, a motorboat on the river, Camille, in the mountains. Well, that sort of thing. You're grown-ups. You need it. And you're an adult too," the woman reminded me. "Soon to be 19. And you're acting like a spoiled teenager. You don't want to come with us, that's fine. But you can't go alone in a foreign country. You're gonna sit in your room and wait for us. And it's clear you've planned a bed for the whole day, but we'll come back. And then we'll go for a walk along the night quay until the evening alone, without jumping out of bed." Nancy began to gather. "I'd better go with you. I don't want to puff myself up all by myself, but I'll have to redo my manicure." "You will," Adriana smiled. "Daddy paid for the course and bought you everything you need for a reason. Get dressed quickly. You have 15 minutes to get ready. I'll meet you downstairs." An hour later, the Otis family was on their way to the bottom of the mountain motorcycle, which is part of the Sagittarius Ridge. There they were met by a guide who would take them to the top of the mountain, to the highest point of Tbilisi, and tell them about the sights. A powerful path led the tourists to the elevator that would take them to the top. The tour guide was pouring out facts and interesting stories like from a cornucopia. "Let me remind you that this is the highest point of Tbilisi," the guide told us, "as much as 740 meters above sea level." "Excuse me," Nancy interrupted him. "Why does it have that name? Does it translate somehow, I suppose?" "Yes, of course it does. The name of the mountain translates from Georgian as the Holy Mountain. Holy Mountain is Christopher. Yes, literally Holy Mountain. According to legend, the ascetic street David settled here in the 6th century. And in the 19th century, a stone church was built on the site of his prayer room." The guide continued the story. "Around the church since 1929, there is a pantheon with numerous burial places of prominent people of Georgia, famous writers, artists, scientists, and national heroes." "I understand," Stephen inserted a remark into the guide's monologue. "The TV tower is at the very top. We will go to it, or go straight to the Turtle to Hymn Lake. The TV tower, height of 275 meters, was built in 1955 on the very top of the mountain. It can be seen from almost every corner of the city, and it is one of the symbols of Tbilisi." Excursion guide, stopping near the platform for cars. The funicular continued. "There is also a park where we can go out, and a restaurant. One of the walls of the restaurant is decorated with monumental frescoes and paintings dedicated to Pirosmani. We will climb up there as well and go to the lake." A leisurely ascent among beautiful nature took about 10 minutes. During it, Otis listened attentively to the guide, looked around with interest, and took lots of photos to save their memories in a photo album. Climbing to the top, they answered donuts in the cafe, cable car, enjoyed the view of the city, and walked around the park. After an hour, they headed to the other side of the mountain to reach the Turtles' Lake. That's how they spent an unforgettable 2-week vacation in Tbilisi as a family. But Parabola is going on a car tour through the ancient cities of Georgia to admire the nature and architecture of small towns and continue their acquaintance with this amazing country. Between Tel Aviv and Signal, the Otis family saw advertisements for several hiking trails through the mountains. They decided to stop and take part in one of the climbs, choosing a mountain that was not too high. After all, little Molly was completely unprepared. After making their way to one group, led by an experienced guide, they set off on a little hike through the mountain peaks in the expanse of Georgia, following a route that took them over cliff faces and glades with their warrior trees. Parents feared for their children's lives. And as, apparently, not for nothing, Nancy liked to take crazy pictures. She got too close to the edge of the cliff and plummeted down so fast that no one had time to react. Nancy. All the family members screamed in unison. Stephen, saving her rather than with her Stephen, sobbing, rushed to the edge of the cliff. Adriana. Adriana, stop. Stephen grabbed his wife tightly. Stop. Don't you dare look over there. A real panic and commotion ensued. Tourists gathered around. Unsuccessful mothers were screaming and wringing their hands. The younger children didn't know what to do. Frightened little Molly was sobbing uncontrollably. Approaching cautiously to the edge of the cliff with several men who had called together to help, the head of the family felt an attack of bad luck. But then, to his incredible relief, he saw that his daughter had by some miracle managed to cling to a sturdy-looking bush that was growing out of a crevice in the cliff. If it wasn't for this horrifying accident now grabbing everyone's attention, one could admire the view from here. It was simply breathtaking. A valley spread out below, covered in a green carpet of grasses and bright patches of flowers. The air was clear and incredibly fresh, filled with the scent of mountain plants. The sky seemed to glow from within with a bright porcelain blue color without a single cloud of sunlight illuminating the valley, making it even more beautiful. The wind lightly moved the grass, creating waves on the sea of green. And not far from the cliff, sheep were grazing on a small plateau area. Honey, don't move. Stephen shouted. We're going to get you out of there. Somebody help me. What are you standing there for? We have to do something. We've already called the rescue team. Another tourist tried to calm the man down. Yeah, by the time they get here, my daughter could be down. But we can't get her out of there by ourselves. The guide said. No one has a rope. The sobs are yours, Adriana asked. Maybe we could toss it to my girl so she can untie it. And we'll pick her up. No, answered all the participants in the event in turn. All the while the other campers, the tour guide and Adriana, and the kids were trying to figure out how to save Nancy. Until the rescuers arrived, Stephen was thrashing around looking for real help and trying to talk to his daughter, who was sobbing with fear and afraid to move. While everyone was thrashing around looking for a solution, a young lad nearby sheep herded the sheep. Seeing what a difficult situation the girl was in, decided to help. The pasture was covered with lush green grass, which softly sowed bodies under the feet of the guy, who moved towards the rock on which the accident occurred. The sheep were all the while grazing peacefully in the meadow, their white wool glistening in the sunshine. The shepherd was able to climb a ledge low off the ground so that he could reach Nancy with a rope. He succeeded, but the girl was so frightened that she did not know what to do with the rope, especially since she didn't have enough space. The tourist guide and the girl's parents watched the young man from above, who began to climb up the practically allotted rock Helena. The ascent was difficult and dangerous. The rock was so steep and slippery that the young man's boots could barely hold on for longer than 2 seconds on small exposures. But he kept climbing, clinging to ledges and cracks in the rock. His hands and feet trembled with exertion, but he did not give up. At last, after much effort, the lad managed to reach the bush on which Nancy was stuck. He obliged the already exhausted by her screams and fear victim, and climbed higher to pass the rope to the standing men. The further ascent was even more difficult and proved no easy test for the shepherd. The surface of the rock was uneven and covered in small cracks, making every step dangerous. Despite this, he kept moving upward, overcoming fear and fatigue. His hands were slipping on the smooth surface of the rock, but he persevered on his way to the safe path where he was eagerly awaited. Finally, by the combined efforts of his father, the guide, the young man, and several male hikers, the distressed Nancy was pulled out. My dear, shaking hands with his daughter's savior and hugging him tightly, almost crying, said Stephen. Thank you so much for saving our treasure. Ask for anything you want. Any amount will pay it all. Thank you. I'm fine. The young man was embarrassed. I'm glad I could help, and I'm happy I did. Now I must go before my herd scatters all over the plateau. Goodbye, our savior. Adriana hugged the boy goodbye. With tears of joy, goodbye. The young man said goodbye to everyone and disappeared from sight around a dangerous corner. What a noble lad, said Nancy Stephen's mother. He should be thanked anyway. Tanya interrupted Stephen's wife. Now we must think of a way to bring her daughter to her senses. I'll deal with this shepherd later. Yes, of course, agreed Adriana. Take Christopher and Molly. Hold their hands. Do not let them out until we come down from this stupid mountain. Otis, the head of the family, gave instructions, and I'll carry the cash in my arms. There's an ambulance waiting for you at the bottom, the tour guide remarked, and I'll go with you to help and back you up on the descent. Thank you, thanked the man, taking Nancy in his arms. He commanded, let's go. Of course, none of the Otis continued after all the events. A car tour through the towns of Georgia. They returned to Tbilisi to the hotel where they had stayed earlier. There Nancy spent several days under the care of a private doctor. The girl lay on her bed, drowning in soft change. Her long hair was spread over the pillow, and her face was lightly touched with a blush. She was dressed in a light white shirt, which beautifully lightened her slender figure. The room during the day was always flooded with sunlight, the rays of which penetrated through the open window, filling the air with warmth and coziness. On the wall opposite the bed hung a painting of a mountain landscape. This subject later on reminded the victim very much of what had happened. Eventually, she took it down and put it away. Coming to her senses, Nancy settled down to recall all the events that had taken place that day. For from the shock, it seemed to her as if none of it had been real, as if it had not been with her. But she knew that her life had almost been cut short on that stupid slope for wanting to take a cool picture. Mom told Camille about her rescuer, who was on a tip from nearby. We wanted to thank him, Mom shared with her, but he said he didn't need anything. Dad tried to give him an envelope with a small amount, but he handed it back. I want to thank him myself, Nancy said confidently. Where can I find him? What's his name? Nancy, dear, he has a very interesting name, Rick. And he's not hard to find, not far from his father. He grills kebabs for tourists in the countryside and herds his sheep. But first, you have to get your strength and eat, Adriana warned. The next morning, without informing her parents, but only leaving a note in the room, Nancy went in search of her savior. On the way, she bought a small souvenir, a bottle of Vegiani wine. The girl very quickly found the parking lot of her savior, and when she hesitantly froze quite close, she could make out the young man who had pulled her through the abyss. Rick appeared to be a man with a distinctly Georgian appearance, tall, slender, with dark hair and slightly swarthy skin. When he turned in her direction, Nancy glared at his eyes, which had an unusually deep dark color, almost black. Hello, was all Nancy could utter. Both answered in their native language. Rick, what can I do for you? I'm you. The girl was confused. You don't remember me. A couple days ago, you saved me. I fell off a cliff, and a beautiful stranger smiled and a guy, for the rescue of which everyone wants to hand me money. I'm glad you're okay. But I'm not going to change my mind about the financial reward. Every self-respecting man would do the same. My name is Nancy. The girl blushed. And I didn't come for that. Or rather, I came to thank you for saving me. But I didn't bring money. I brought wine. They say it's very tasty. I thought you might like to accept such a modest gift from a rescued person. Nice to meet you. Nancy, my name is Rick. But you obviously already know that from the wine. Thank you. Chuckles. It's my pleasure. Would you like a kebab? I'd love one. While Rick prepared the necessary ingredients, sliced the meat, forgot our puree, and set them on the brazier. Nancy was chopping onions and spooning Billy sauce over the meat to make it more succulent. As we talked, the young man kept making sure the meat didn't burn but was still good about roasting, and in doing so, he never stopped sharing stories from his life. Nancy listened avidly to Rick's pleasant, deep, and richly toned timbre, which seemed to nod to the girl. The young people had long ago switched to you and were telling each other about themselves, and eating freshly fried kebabs with great appetite. By the middle of the conversation, Nancy suddenly realized that she had fallen in love. And Rick, as if nothing had happened, continued to talk about his life. I live here in the foothills, and only in the summer. My parents worked hard, and I grew up with an uncle, and who had no family of his own. He is now almost 70 years old. Bid Zena, it's hard. Housekeeping. So here I am helping out as and when I can bat. He through Nancy. That means uncle in Georgian. Smiled back Rick. Sometimes I have native Georgian words and expressions in my speech, although I speak more Russian. I even study at a Russian-speaking university. Which one? Where? And for whom? I asked a young man a lot of questions. Nancy, you don't think I'm prying. I'm just curious. I still haven't decided what I want to study. My parents gave me a year to decide. I'm studying at the Faculty of Humanities at Tbilisi State University. Believe me, I didn't choose where I got into school. You only help your uncle in the summer. And I live in a dormitory. But soon I'll graduate, and I hope to find a job close to home to keep helping him. And I myself like to take care of pledges, chickens, and other household chores. Tell me about your life as a student. Asked, chewing another piece of fried meat. I'm very interested. Student life is full of adventures and interesting events or innovations, began the story Rick. Every day becomes a new challenge for us. So everyone stared fearfully at the guy, perplexed Nancy. No, of course not, laughed the shepherd. I'm just kidding. But we do have adventures, although it's more of a quest. What kind of quest? Who has time to bathe before the couples? Generally the showers, which is one for the whole floor. Rick started listing off by twiddling his thumbs, then whether you can have breakfast, because someone might have already eaten your food or burned the kettle. Bloody hell. That's all the girl could say. But you get used to it quickly. It's very interesting at university. We socialize a lot with friends, with classmates, play computer games, and I often read books. You can participate in various student clubs and activities, which helps you develop your skills and knowledge. I like to read too. I even dream of writing. I don't know yet though. Nancy shared her thoughts. What exactly are you reading? But I really like John. Without thinking, answered Rick. Well, and Russian classics I read. I'm interested in that too. I was especially impressed by Dostoevsky. And you have a favorite book? I'm a book music lover, said Nancy. I read everything that I like and interested in the annotations, but more often it's detectives, fantasy, novels, but not love, but family sagas, for example. And my favorite is A Banal Bookmaster and Margarita. Everyone knows it now. Yeah, it's incredibly popular, and I'm cool with it. I have another favorite book, Perfumer. The story of one murderer, shared by a girl and Jane Eyre. These 3 books I collect in different editions and translations. Good choices, great literary taste, praised Rick. As for me, I can't collect a big library yet, but as soon as I graduated from college and settled either in my parents' house or in my uncle's, I realized my dream to collect the entire collection of books by Sergei Lukianenko. Wonderful plans, said Camille, raising her glass. We should drink to the realization of dreams. Let's drink to dreams that should come true. Rick won the hearts of a young metropolitan girl who had never seen such a handsome, intelligent, and brave man. When he decided to walk Nancy to the hotel, the girl agreed. Almost reaching the hotel, she confessed her sympathy to the young man. Rick was not averse to having an affair with a beautiful young Russian woman, so he offered her to meet tomorrow and go on a date. Happy and elated Nancy returned to the hotel in high spirits, where her angry parents, who could not contact her all day, were waiting for her. After all, the glossless had left her cell phone in her room. The young couple met in secret. Nancy was afraid to tell their parents that she was in a relationship with a Georgian. She had to come up with ridiculous excuses not to go to dinner with her family or not to participate in excursions. But the date of their departure arrived. The day before, Rick and Nancy exchanged contacts and promised to write and call each other constantly. The rest of the summer and the whole fall the lovers spent at a distance. They were constantly video calling and texting every minute of the day. On winter vacation, Nancy decided to come to her beloved in Polisi, but she came up with a completely different story for her parents. What was it? Surprised Adriana. When the daughter announced her plans for the winter holidays, ski resort, Nancy told us, in Adygia and Krasnodar region, Lisa and I want to go skiing for a week. Two young, beautiful girls tried to talk my daughter Stephen out of going. One will go to hell to go skiing. Unthinkable. You think it over. I'm not talking to Lisa. She has her own parents. But we're not done with you yet. But Dad started to whine and pity Nancy. Her parents are letting her go. And I'm stuck here like a schoolgirl in front of you, going to a night disco. We'll get rooms. We'll be supervised by instructors. It's a gated community. I promise we won't go off base. Crazy. All right, Mom agreed, with the condition that you stay in touch at all times. Thanks, Mommy, I will. No one asks me, as usual, spotted me by the bullet. Well, please, okay, waved in the direction of his daughter Otis. But keep Mommy's condition. What can I do with you? You're gonna be 19 soon. You're Miss Independent. Thank you very much. Nancy hugged her father. I'll run to the Mariinsky and pack my bags. Don't you need to buy tickets? Adriana asked. I already bought them. I knew you would agree. Sending a kiss from the stairs, the girl ran to her room. The girl very quickly got ready for the road, persuaded Lisa to fly with her, but only to Georgia, not to Moisture. And happy on January 1, she flew with her friend to Polisi. Rick met them there, joyful and madly in love with his girlfriend. The friend settled in a separate room, but when her parents called, Nancy was always near, creating the necessary alibi. And in the rest of the time the girl was walking, getting acquainted with the city and national peculiarities on her own. After all, Nancy did not leave her beloved not a step away. Rick decided to show the girl in the capital of Georgia what they had not seen with their parents in one of the evenings, when the sun was slowly descending over Tbilisi, enveloping the city in a golden pink glow, and the city walls, decorated with ancient frescoes and mosaics, sparkled in the rays of the setting sun like precious stones. The boy led Nancy through the narrow streets of the city. They walked leisurely, holding hands. Among the ancient buildings and ancient churches they strolled, inhaling the fragrance of blossoming trees and listening to the birds singing. The lovers were like two parts of one whole, perfectly complementing each other. He was tall and slender, with hair the color of raven, winged and graceful, and delicate, with long curls. Nancy's eyes glowed with love and joy as she looked at Rick. That evening they passed by small cafes and restaurants, where the locals were enjoying their evening out, sipping flavored coffee and eating delicious and Georgian dishes. The lovers stopped to buy fresh fruit and sweets from the street vendors. As they strolled through the old town, they noticed a group of musicians playing traditional instruments. Rick and Nancy stopped to listen to the music and enjoy the atmosphere of old Tbilisi. The next day, they decided to go to the botanical garden for a picnic. And tonight they danced under the stars, accompanied by street musicians, enjoying each other's company. In the morning, Rick and Nancy bought hot chachapuri and lemonade and went to the botanical gardens for a picnic. The landscape of the botanical garden in Tbilisi impressed the young lady very much. It is more like a big forest in a canton surrounded by mountains, she said to her young man as she walked past several ponds with frogs. After looking at the waterfalls and stopping and sitting down on the grass near the stream, how beautiful it is here. Close your eyes and take in the atmosphere of this wonderful place, said Nancy. You can hardly hear the sounds of the city here. Yes, agreed Rick. It's a place of strength for me. I like to come here, find a cozy corner, and have a little picnic. We, by the way, as long as we walked, never once saw a single cafe, and you won't find one here. At several tropics you can meet vending machines with water and soda, shared information about his favorite place, Topaz. This place is still a bit original, and the authorities do not want to spoil the landscape of the garden. We do not meet such a thing in Moscow, laughed. If there is a park, square, garden, and so on, there is bound to be a cafe, restaurant, or small stores with ready-to-eat food. I know. I was in the Russian capital a couple of times with my parents. I didn't really like it. Why such a big city? So many places to visit. Nancy wondered. It's too noisy, too crowded, and the subway. Rick laughed. I've never quite figured it out. You haven't been to St. Petersburg yet, said the girl. Tell me, where will we go tomorrow? And the day after tomorrow before we leave? Do you have plans? Yes, of course. Rick said mysteriously. Let's eat, or the chakapuri will get cold. The next day, the couple spent almost the whole day in the room watching movies and eating junk food. And in the evening, having put on comfortable shoes, Rick took Nancy to the Tabora Monastery. It was not crowded to watch the sunset at the temple, and from the observation deck, there was a beautiful view of small and charming Tbilisi. And the next evening before departure, Rick proposed to the girl in a restaurant, quietly having dinner and enjoying each other's company. The young people reached the dessert. What was Nancy's amazement when instead of ordering a new Anna Pavlova cake, she was brought a red velvet box on her plate. At that moment, Rick got down on one knee in front of the girl. Whose are you, the meaning of my life? The guy started his speech, confused in languages. I don't have enough words in Russian and Georgian languages to express all the feelings I have near you. Sweetheart, become mine forever. Make me happy. Marry me. I will, exclaimed happy Nancy. I do, agreed Rick. Putting the ring on her finger, her lover kissed her and lifted her in his arms, encircling her, and then asked her to dance. Against the background of their idyll, and sounded a small restaurant orchestra, which created an atmosphere of love, tranquility, and happiness. So ended an unforgettable week for the couple in love, and began a new story engaged Nancy and Rick at the airport. Saying goodbye, they knew that they parted for a short time, because the girl decided to immediately tell her parents about everything. Upon arrival in Moscow, the friends said goodbye and got into different cabs. The driver Nancy turned on a quiet, soothing music, which helped the girl to relax a little and forget about all the problems and worries. As they drove through the night city, Nancy looked at the twinkling lights and thought about how beautiful the capital was. Finally, after a short but pleasant ride, they pulled up to the girl's house. The cab driver helped unload the luggage and said goodnight. Nancy, thanking him for the wonderful ride, paid for his services. Having gone up to her floor, she opened the door of the apartment and breathed in the familiar cozy smell of her native home. I won't tell them anything today, Nancy thought, hugging her parents. All the talking in the morning. Family. Joyful and disembodied Nancy flew into the dining room. I have wonderful news for you. So anxious to know what his daughter's news was on getting married. The girl blurted out. I mean, Christopher choked on his tea. Nancy, what kind of joke is that? Adriana gasped in surprise. Who is he? Asked the father. It's not a joke. Putting her hand up and showing her ring, Nancy replied. My fiancé, Rick. We have been together for a long time, and we love each other. Is this the shepherd who saved you? Asked the brother. Yes, he is. I went to thank him and couldn't part with him. After we left, we stayed in touch all the time. And on New Year's Eve, I decided to visit him. So you didn't go to see him? Mom asked. No. I went to Tbilisi again, but I was really with Lisa. I didn't know how you would feel about the fact that I went there, so I lied a little. But I have a little decency started to tell off my daughter Stephen. And the fact that you are together and that he proposed to you is an even bigger lie. Sweetie turned to Nancy, the mom. He's Georgian. Are you ready to be a Muslim? Mom. In Georgia, the main religion is the Orthodox Church. We were told about it on the tours, but it's still weird. She's a big girl. Let her decide for herself. We're not thrilled, but he seems like a nice guy. Invite Rick and his parents over. Nancy squealed with joy, threw herself on her father's neck, and smacked her parents on the cheek, and rushed off to call her fiancé with the news and an invitation to come over. Rick agrees with the bride's parents and decides to come with his parents. In 2 weeks, they will return from a business trip and stay in Moscow to wait for their son from Georgia. The long-awaited day came when the son's parents were to meet at the Moscow airport early in the morning. Robert, Kevin, and Miranda drove to the airport to meet Rick. Although they were excited, the parents tried to stay calm and not show their emotions. When they saw him in the arrivals, all their hearts sank with happiness. Rick ran up to them, and the parents hugged the young man tightly. Unable to hold back tears of joy when everyone calmed down a bit, the trio went to a restaurant to have lunch, share the news of the last year they hadn't seen each other, and discuss their upcoming introduction to their future in-laws. Rick was the first to speak, the head of the family. "Tell us about the girl and her parents." "We don't know anything." "Yes, my boy." Miranda supported the father. "You really surprised us with the wedding and meeting the parents. Do you remember that I told you that I saved a girl who fell off a cliff near the plateau where I was herding my uncle's sheep?" "Yes." The parents responded with glee. "So she and I started hanging out," Rick continued. "And after a while we started dating. But then they moved away. But we kept in touch by phone and video. And times. Robert, Kevin, and HIV love long distance through the phone. And to meet in real life to go get a sweetheart. But we met a few months later on New Year's vacation in Tbilisi." Rick gasped with surprise at the young man's mother. "The girl came to you, not you to her. It happened that way. She suggested it, and I agreed." "Blurred eyes," replied the young man. "But after a week together, I realized that I did not want to let her go and made her an offer." "You asked for money for that?" "Yes," continued Rick. "After the proposal, Nancy went home and told her parents about our engagement. And they, in turn, invited us all over to meet her. And here we are," Robert Marlowe stated. "And here you are. I'll call Camille and see if they're expecting us, or if they're not ready yet." "Okay." After looking at the menu, Miranda decided to order. "I'm gonna grab a cup of coffee." We met the family at the Otis apartment. The whole family fussed on the bed on the table and preparing for the upcoming acquaintance. Nancy was anticipating the meeting with her beloved, not thinking about how this acquaintance of parents would go. She spent almost the entire morning in front of the mirror, examining her reflection. From there, a young, beautiful, slender brown woman whose green eyes shone with intelligence and kindness looked back at the girl. Nancy styled her long hair so that it fell over her shoulders in soft waves. It took her a long time to decide what to wear, and in the end, she chose a dark blue dress with a deep neckline in the back and short sleeves. Only the dress was decorated with delicate lace, which emphasized her thin waist, and the skirt was lush and long, which gave the girl an additional grace and elegance. Hearing the intercom ringing and her mother shouting that guests were on their way, Nancy was quickly caught up. On her neck, a graceful necklace of white gold with diamonds, which complemented her image, and in her ears on the move inserted small earrings, carnations with the same diamonds. The image of the girl was completed with elegant shoes, loafers, which she managed to put on right before the front doors opened. And since he was dressed with a needle, he was wearing a classic suit, obviously sewn to individual order. Leather shoes on his feet, his face was smoothly shaved, and his hair was neatly styled. The young Georgian was smiling, and his smile was so sincere and warm that it was impossible not to smile back. He looked at Nancy with love and respect. Barely crossing the threshold, he greeted his parents. His lover gave flowers to Stephen, and Adriana shook his hand. There was silence in the apartment for a second. And then there was a sound of ice cream for the kids, ice cream for his grandmother, flowers. Be careful not to confuse Kutuzov. After this quote, the space exploded with ringing laughter from everyone present. Once everyone had calmed down, Rick corrected the errors of his greeting and introduced his parents, and Nancy hers. Then everyone made their way to the table. A huge table was set up in the living room, left with a variety of dishes. Adriana had made sure that everyone was comfortable and no one would go hungry. That's why there were traditional Georgian kakapuri, lamb kebab, homemade pickles, and much more. Even though the Otis family was very friendly, open, and outgoing, and the Marlowe family was more reserved, they still managed to find a common language. The women talked about their hobbies and shared food recipes, and the men joked a lot and talked about fishing. The younger Otis children felt out of place, surrounded by adults who were having a great time talking amongst themselves. And the older sister couldn't help but admire her lover. So Christopher and Molly went to their father's study after dinner to watch TV there. Toward the end of the evening, before dessert was served, Adriana called the younger Otis to the table. As the woman brought out the cake, topped gracefully with flower petals and brightly colored fruit, Molly slipped her tights-clad feet onto the tile and fell right under her mother's feet. What happened next was like a slow-motion movie. Adriana managed to stay on her feet, but was blown over by the cake. It flew over Molly, through the poof, and landed on the floor, doing several flips in the air. Everyone was scared for the little girl, who was making strange noises. But rushing to her, the parents heard Molly laughing, smearing cream and dessert sprinkles all over her face. And the cake was really good. Smiling, Molly said, licking her fingers, "Now I'm like a sweet dessert too." After examining the girl and realizing that she was all right, everyone exhaled, and looking at the brown stain, flying petals from the bridge, and grimy 6-year-old girl began to laugh. On that happy note, the families laughed the rest of the evening, exchanged gifts, blessed the children with marriage, and promised to support each other in times of need. Rick and Nancy could not be happy with this outcome and did not let go of each other's hands all evening. When Robert, Kevin, and Miranda and their son left, Nancy's parents began to clean the table and mop the floor, trying to clean up the chocolate already under the juice. Adriana and Stephen, having sent the children to bed, for some time discussed the previous evening and thought about what kind of wedding to organize for the young people. "We'll talk to Nancy in the morning," said the head of the family. "It's not for us to marry them to decide." Nancy started talking to her daughter, Adriana. "We really liked Rick's family, and he was at his best when he rescued you." "Yeah." Stephen stepped in, a well-mannered boy and parents. "Good for them, but they're traveling a lot. They don't know much about their son, but it's a good impression. We're going to apply tomorrow," Nancy said. "What kind of wedding in April?" Mom asked. "It's cold. It's raining. We'll only celebrate in a restaurant. There's no off-site registration in the countryside." Mom interrupted Adriana's daughter's monologue. "We don't want all that tinsel with the restaurant, the ransom, and everything." "What do you want?" The father decided to ask his daughter. "Rick and I just want to get married in beautiful suits, have a small photo shoot just for two, and fly to Tbilisi to the mountains." In a dreamy voice, Nancy told of her wedding plans. "And what about me and this sweetheart? What about Christopher and Molly?" Adriana asked. "What about our memories of our happiest day, our loved ones?" "Adriana, stop pushing your daughter," interrupted his wife Stephen. "They want to modestly sign and fly away. Then that's what we want, too. I'll pay for you any dress you want and help with the trip. At least we'll be able to go to the registry office." Barely audible, Mom asked. "Of course, at the registry office, Rick and I are waiting for all our nearest and dearest," hugging her parents, said Nancy. "Thank you for your love." Filing to register their marriage the next day, Nancy and her friend Lisa went in search of a magical wedding dress. "Don't look at the price," her father texted. "Pick the one you like." The girls went around many stores and boutiques, but could not find what they needed. Finally, in one of the bridal salons, the girls saw a dress that immediately caught their attention. Nancy said to Lisa with a gasp, "This is your dress. I don't see any other on you. Go a model bride," listened to her friend, especially since she herself liked the dress very much. The consultant helped the girl to get dressed, And when the curtain opened in front of Lisa's gaze, Nancy appeared in an elegant wedding dress. The corset dress was adorned with a beautiful train and a shimmering bottom. The puffy skirt was adorned with a wide ribbon, which made the fragile image of the young bride chic and at the same time very delicate. Her friends were amazed at how well the dress looked on Nancy. Her green eyes sparkled and her brown hair complemented the look perfectly and blended perfectly with the cream color of the dress. It was the very dress the girls were looking for, paying for the purchase with Daddy's card. The friends went to shoe and jewelry stores to put together the entire wedding look. With makeup and hairstyle, we'll not have to worry. Lisa graduated from makeup artist training and moonlighted as a makeup artist by picking up women for various events on the wedding day. From early in the morning, the Otis home was bustling with activity. The parents were waiting for the groom's family, and the bride and her friend were getting ready for their room when their parents arrived. Stephen went to get his daughter to bring her down from the second floor of the apartment to the groom's room. When Nancy and her father appeared at the top of the stairs, Rick gasped. The bride was wearing a beautiful dress that emphasized her figure. The long train was carried by Lisa and Molly. The girl's hair was styled in a beautiful updo, from which a few strands were released. These strands framed, and white face, which was decorated delicately. Makeup in hand, Nancy held a bouquet of flowers that matched her dress perfectly. The bride looked very happy and smiled at all the relatives. Her eyes glistened with joy, and her cheeks were ruddy with excitement. The marriage registration took place in Shipolov in the registry office itself. It attracted the newlyweds by the fact that it had a spacious registration hall and was conveniently located near the Terrazzino Park, where they were to have a photo shoot. Guests congratulated the young ones when they came out of the registry office doors, pelted them with flowers, and gave them gifts. In Terrazzino Park, you can feel like in a fairy tale. There is everything here for a romantic and beautiful wedding photo session of Rick and Nancy. They shot against the background of flowering gardens, picturesque ponds on elegant bridges, and in cozy grids next to antique columns and sculptures. Bright and emotional photos of the newlyweds were taken. On the same day, the newlyweds went on a wedding trip to the mountains. However, not to Belize as planned, but to Austria. The tourist brochure promised an unforgettable variety of hikes. Nancy and Rick decided that they would walk along the trails along the river, occasionally taking the Penguin elevator to gain more than 1,000 meters in altitude. And they also agreed to make time for the main attraction of Meyer, Hoffman, Berlin, Rachelhen, Vigo. This is the name of the Berlin high-altitude route, which is an 8-day walk from hut to hut, during which tourists have the opportunity to explore the high alpine scenery of the Zieler Nature Park and spend the night at the end of each leg of the journey in a hut. It seemed convenient to the newlyweds, and the fact that from each point there is a route back to the valley, if suddenly they do not like something. After landing at the airport and getting to the hotel, Nancy called her parents and told them about their joint plans to hike the 16th and 17th century Berlin route. She warned that the couple would be out of touch in places, but as soon as she had a chance, she would be sure to let her parents know. 2 days later, Rick and Nancy went on an 8-day hike on the high mountain trail, from where the newlyweds never called Stephen and Adriana, who could not find a place for fear for their daughter, but remembering what Rick is capable of, how selflessly he once saved Nancy, decided to wait for news. But they got the news only when the daughter reported in a text message that she was coming home, and the number of her flight-excited parents went to the airport and immediately saw in the passengers their distraught Spruce and daughter, and her husband was not around, apparently was not. Shouted Nancy. Stephen and Adriana rushed towards their daughter, who burst into tears when she saw her parents. Dad and Mom could not get a word out of the girl, so they decided to go home and there try to calm and talk to her. At home, finally, Nancy was able to tell her relatives what had happened on the wedding trip. We went to 19th century Berlin. Occasional sobs. Nancy was talking. 2 points we passed successfully. We were happy. At some point, I realized something was wrong with Rick. He was ill. Adriana impatiently interrupted her daughter. "No," replied Nancy. "I wish he was sick. He just pulled away from me. And on the third day, when we were to continue to the fourth hut, I did not find my husband in our room. I first wanted to go look for him outside, but then I saw a note that he had gone." "Where had he gone?" Dad asked. "Just gone sobbing," said Nancy. Nothing more was said. I decided to turn off the highway and go back to the hotel. There I found that Rick had already been there, packed his things, and withdrew all the money from his card. "What money?" "The one I gave you for your wedding." "Yeah, and the money I had before the wedding." Nancy ended her story sadly. "What a rascal. And you decided to come back right away." Consoling her daughter, Adriana asked, "We should report him. We should report him." Stephen resented him. "No," Nancy exclaimed. "We're not gonna file a report on anybody. If all he wanted from me was money, I'd learn to throw myself in the deep end. But I can't believe it. He looked at me with such love." Before she could finish her sentence, she burst into tears. "Honey," Adriana said, hugging her daughter tightly. Stephen walked out of the room, leaving his wife and daughter from them. He was in a rage. The man decided to call the saints to find out what this behavior of their son was, why he had committed such a despicable act. Dialing Robert, and barely waiting for the matchmaker to pick up the phone, he began to straighten things out. Stephen abruptly interrupted his Marlowe monologue. "Wait, I don't know what you're talking about. What did your son do?" Having calmed down a little, continued the conversation. Stephen Otis left his wife at the resort and ripped her off. "What? Where do you get such information about a daughter who is hysterical, who was able to return home only because she had some money in cash, who was left alone in a strange country?" Nervously replied Nancy's father. "That can't be true." Robert Kevin said absent-mindedly. "He phoned just yesterday, saying how they were having a great time on their own. But that means he's having a great time with some other Camille," said Stephen Riley. "Because our Nancy at home is devastated by your son's behavior. I'll look into it," Marlowe promised. "I'll find out where Rick is and why he stole money from your daughter. We're very sorry this happened, but honey and I don't know what happened. Our son truly loves your daughter. I see Stephen has decided to stop talking. Deal with your son, but don't let me see him in my house until he decides to apologize and return the money." Nancy didn't leave the apartment for a month. Christopher tried not to hit on his sister, and little Molly wanted to cheer her up, but she couldn't do it. After another 2 weeks, the girl began to feel nauseous. Otis first thought it was stress and malnutrition, but Nancy noticed on the woman's calendar that she was 3 weeks late. She asked her mom to buy a pregnancy test, informing her of the delay and taking a test the evening and morning of the next day. Nancy saw 2 bright red stripes on the white small cardboard. Mom called out through the closed bathroom door, and Nancy was confirmed. What to do? "Nancy, whatever do you decide to keep the baby or not?" Adriana answered her daughter. "We have to go to the doctor, get an ultrasound and find out the time frame, and then make a decision. Sign me up for breakfast." "Okay, sweetie. And don't tell anyone yet." I asked Nancy. She looked out the door. Not Daddy, not my brother and sister. It was a deal. The next day, she and her mom went to the private clinic where their gynecologist was waiting for them. She was asked to lie down on the couch. A special gel was applied and a monitor was turned on which a special scanner reflects the uterus where the doctor can see the pregnancy. "Congratulations, Nancy," with a smile on her face, said the doctor. "You have a match and a pregnancy. I'm 8 to 9 weeks along, which is consistent with your delay. I can still get an abortion?" asked Nancy. "In principle, yes. Up to 12 weeks, it's possible. But I wouldn't advise surgical intervention at that stage. There are risks. There's already a heartbeat." Adriana just asked. "Turn it on. Let him listen to it." "Yeah, sure." The gynecologist answered without taking her eyes off the monitor. "Your baby is within the normal range of 140 beats per minute. Listen to this." And in those heartbeats, Nancy heard her baby telling her that he was alive and wanted to be born. It's like my mom knew I couldn't have an abortion if I heard my baby's heart beating. Thought pregnant, letting some mucus out. Back home, they reported the pregnancy to Stephen, who was shocked and didn't know how to react. But he supported his daughter, who was already in a state of shock. And in the first stage of depression, parents decided to send their daughter for treatment for depression in a sanatorium. Prudently negotiated the form of treatment taking into account Nancy's pregnancy. The girl was brought to the sanatorium for 3 weeks. The Otis family rented an apartment not far from the facility so that they would not leave their daughter alone and would be close by even if they could not see Nancy. When they checked the girl into the sanatorium, the head doctor told them that there were 2 psychiatrists, 2 psychotherapists, 2 rehabilitation physicians, and 2 clinical psychologists working in the unit designed to treat depressive spectrum disorders. We also had nurses, along with the initial secondary medical education and experience in medicine for at least 5 years, have a higher psychological education, proudly reported the chief doctor. There is also a procedural nurse, a hostess, a social worker, and a maid to clean the wards. Nancy uncomplainingly agreed to the treatment, hoping to recover before she gave birth. As she checked into her local room and sorted out some of her belongings, she stood at the window and looked out at the beautiful landscape, green trees, blue sky, and bright sunshine. Her room was small but cozy. She had everything she needed for a comfortable 3-week stay: a bed, a nightstand, a closet, and a dressing table. There were paintings of nature on the walls, which added to the coziness. The room even had its own bathroom with a shower and a small washing machine. There was a knock on the door to inform them that there was breakfast waiting for Nancy in the dining room. Going there, she chose an omelet, yogurt, fruit, and coffee. After eating, Nancy decided to take a walk around the grounds. There is still time before the appointment with the attending physician, Lulu thought, leaving the tray near the kitchen and thanking the dining room staff. The territory of the sanatorium was fenced and was very beautiful and well maintained. There were camille with trees, flower beds with flowers, fountains, and gazebos for relaxing. Camille walked around Camille, enjoyed the fresh air, and listened to the birds singing, not thinking at that moment about anything but the child who was now in her womb. What should she do? How to raise the baby? Would she be able to cope with it? These were the questions that Nancy was asking herself every day, adding more negativity to her condition. Suddenly, the phone vibrated in her pocket, announcing that it was time for her to go to the doctor's office. The doctor's office was only small, but cozy. The walls were painted light blue, and the floor was covered with linoleum already yellowed from sunlight. In the center of the room stood a table, on which were medical documents and some medicines. Next to the table was a cabinet with books on medicine. On the wall hung posters with pictures of the human body and its organs. I wonder, she thought, why he needs the internal structure of the body if they are more brain-right. She listened to the doctor in half an ear, occasionally nodding her head and trying to absorb his speech, which just poured in a huge stream. Our sanatorium provides a full range of therapeutic procedures for people with depression, recovering the body after severe stress. Digging through the documents, doctor. Treatment of depression in the sanatorium is carried out according to a special program, which includes diet, hospital, therapy, physiotherapist, physical therapy. Rehabilitation after depression will not only restore your psychological balance, but also bring back the brightness of colors in life. Good mood of joy, positive outlook, especially since you're about to become a mother. On a diet, I will not sit down, gave voice Nancy, and I've already lost a lot of weight. And I don't eat unhealthy, and I'm satiated with small amounts of food. Well, made a note in the chart. Sick, lying down. What about physical therapy? Gentle, of course. I agree, she sighed. If you think it will help me, it should. But most importantly, it should help you. A change of lifestyle, a change of residence, temporary. And no one will remind you of your depression after we meet. You're just resting in a sanitarium. I'm not getting any medication. No. Looking into Nancy's eyes, the attending physician answered, "Your condition can be normalized without medication. At least I think so. Especially since you're pregnant. We wouldn't risk it. Thank you for your answers. I was the only patient who thanked me for my understanding. I thought it would be much worse, and that I would get nagged for being depressed. We're professionals, and when a person is really depressed, there's a good reason for it. And we don't know many of yours. And personally, I don't see anything wrong with that happening to you, do you? Thank you." Almost in a whisper said Camille, who still thought that she was not behaving appropriately to the situation. "Here's your spa book. There is your treatment. And here," opening the penultimate page, the doctor pointed to the top line of your schedule of sessions with the psychologist. "No one insists, and if you don't show up, no one will scold you. But if I were you, I'd go at least a couple times. I will." On her way out, Nancy said goodbye. "Goodbye. Goodbye, Nancy. You'll come to see me on your last day, too. I'll prepare the discharge." "All right, thank you." After these words, the door closed behind the girl. But the attending doctor looked at her for some time, thinking about Nancy's difficult life situation and sympathizing with her. While Nancy was being treated for depression in the sanatorium, the girl's parents and brother and sister were also vacationing in Kislovodsk, constantly walking and taking part in many excursions. Otis did not have enough vocabulary to describe to her friends all the beauty of Kislovodsk. Masha was telling her friend Adriana that Kislovodsk is a famous resort of the Caucasus. Since the 19th century, it has been attracting tourists with its picturesque views, clean mountain air, and of course, its famous mineral water. Narzan. Everyone comes here to improve their physical and spiritual health. The friends listened with great pleasure about the famous resort. They looked at photos and watched video stories. National Park in Kislovodsk made a great impression on everyone. The largest city park in his. Adriana had to answer a lot of questions from her friends, telling interesting facts she had heard from the guide. Its creation began back in the first half of the 19th century and continued with varying success in the following 100 years. Stony banks were made fertile by black soil, and plant seedlings were imported from different parts of Eurasia, including Crimea, the Carpathians, and Georgia. The woman quoted the guide as saying, "As the territory expanded, the park was divided into lower, middle, and upper ones, each with its own unique attractions. What kind of plants, trees are there?" The girl wondered. Best friend Adriana. On the territory of the Valley of Roses, one of the parts of the park planted more than 3 dozen species of roses, which fragrant and pleasing to look at. Nancy's mom shared her memories. "I don't know about the others. The roses just struck me." Every evening, the Otis family strolled along Kurortny Boulevard, passing 400 poplar trees. Despite the fact that the walking area is only half a kilometer long, here is located a huge number of architectural attractions among the architectural structures that attracted the attention of Adriana and Stephen. The old building of the Officers' Assembly, the former Grand Hotel, which now houses the Narzan Sanatorium, as well as the former Podvory Ta Hotel. Every time they passed by these beautiful buildings, the whole family made up different stories about those who might have lived in these apartments. Thus, 3 weeks passed. Nancy had successfully completed her treatment and was sent home. She hoped to learn something about her husband, from whom she was still not divorced. But her father and the matchmakers had no information about his whereabouts. Rick only occasionally wrote to his parents, informing them that he was alive and well. Pregnant Camille coped with the oppressive condition every day and was helped a lot by her loved ones. At the 32nd week of pregnancy, Nancy gave birth to a baby boy and named him Noah. The baby was born a sturdy 3 kilograms, 750 grams, and 57 centimeters tall. Grandparents could not be happy with the boy, who was very similar to his father, but Rick everything except the color of his eyes. Moms, which was extremely surprising, but what only nature will not create. Nancy and her son were greeted from the hospital by the entire Otis family. There was also a friend Lisa and even Rick's parents arrived on the day of discharge. Time went by very slowly for the young mom. Her mood was great. She was already looking forward to seeing her loved ones and introducing them to the new family members. When Nancy and her son finally went into the room for the discharge, she saw how in an instant the excitement on the face of relatives and friends was replaced by great joy. The parents tried very hard to meet their daughter and grandson in a festive way. So there were flowers and balloons and stickers on the car, and a photo session. After arriving home, the baby was placed in a crib on the first floor of the apartment, and all the adults went to the dining room to celebrate the discharge. At the table, Robert, Kevin, and Miranda apologizes for the deed of the son and offers help to the daughter-in-law and grandson. Darling stands up and walks over to Nancy, father-in-law. "If you need anything, we are always here to help." "We are not giving up on our Noah," putting her arm around her daughter-in-law's shoulders, Miranda said. "He's our breed. He's our Schwilly grandson." "Thank you." Thanked Nancy to her husband's parents. "I know you are not to blame for Rick's behavior and do not know where he is, so you don't need to keep apologizing for it. He embarrassed us," said Robert. "What he did was wrong. When I get nervous and often say things in my native language, I'm sorry, yes, we noticed, trying to diffuse the situation," said Adriana. "We will soon speak Georgian ourselves. We already know so many words." And then everyone laughed. Yes, so loudly and resoundingly that woke up Noah, who peacefully advised in the crib. In general, the baby was surprisingly calm. He did not scream, just let his mother sleep. Only when he began to cut his teeth, he became a little cranky. But it quickly passed. During the first few weeks of life, the baby learns to control his body and interact with the world around him. Starting to smile, walk around and reach for objects. Nancy coped well with taking care of the baby. Almost without asking for help from her mom, depression left the girl. As soon as she saw the face of her Noah lying on her chest in the delivery room, and often took walks with the baby in the park near her home. When the baby fell asleep, she would move to a bench and spend time with a book in the fresh air. Here on Lassany Island, on the territory of the former town of Babushkin, there was Babushkinsky Park, in which Nancy sat. She had loved this park since she was a child. It was as if it had been created for leisurely strolls and relaxation all year round. In warm times, little Lulu would ride a horse here, admire the water play of the lights, the musical fountain, and the whole family watched a movie in the summer theater 5. Now the young mother even had the opportunity to stay on the internet connection with her favorite friends, sitting teenager's tree with Flaubert's favorite novel, Madame Bovary. After all, there's a free Wi-Fi zone. Suddenly Nancy's phone rang and an unfamiliar number popped up on the screen, obviously from another country. Camille thought of calling it, but something made her answer it. She heard her husband's familiar voice in the speaker, and she hung up in fear. Barely holding back tears, Camille tried to stop shaking. But then came a text message from the very number that was now calling. "Apparently you recognized my voice, so you hung up." "Yeah, it's me. Rick decided to let you know that I'm alive, and I'm okay. Of course, I can't write much in the message, because I always want to say more in person, looking into your eyes. The only thing I want to write is that I'm sorry. I'm very ashamed that I had to do that. But I had huge problems, and I didn't want you to know about them. I want to video call you today to tell you more about it. But if you don't want to talk to me, I understand. I'll call you. And if you don't pick up, I'll never bother you again." She was still not completely calm. She quickly gathered herself, took the stroller, and quickly moved towards the house, where she called her friend to ask her what to do. Still unable to come to a common decision, Nancy decided to listen to her heart and do what it told her to do at that moment. It was lucky her parents weren't home. No one could prevent the girl from having a conversation, should such a thing take place. Taking care of her son, Nancy was able to distract herself a little. But when the phone rang, a familiar tune set to video call, she froze in surprise. Taking the phone in her hands, she didn't hesitate long enough to answer it. The painfully familiar face of her beloved husband appeared on the screen. They were silent for a few minutes, then both of them cried. Having calmed down a little, Nancy's husband began to tell what had happened in his life that he had to disappear so suddenly for more than a year. Helping my uncle had caused me to miss almost an entire semester. With a sigh, Rick spoke. To keep me from getting expelled, I had to transfer to a tuition-free program. And how to pay for it? It was a shame to ask my parents, so I borrowed money from a loan shark. How did you plan to pay it back? Nancy asked. I thought I'd work and pay it back slowly, but it didn't work out. The interest grew exponentially, and I owed twice as much as I had originally borrowed. I was threatened, beaten. They demanded all the money back at once. They were thugs. Turns out they were. Rick continued the story. 3 days after the last warning, you had an accident. Why didn't you take the reward money from your father then? Didn't he offer it to you? Nancy exclaimed in surprise. But I thought I could solve the financial difficulties myself, and to take money for a deed that anyone could have done. It's not my policy. When you came to me after a time, I decided to improve my financial situation by marrying you. Young, beautiful, and rich. It was all a lie. Holding back tears, Nancy whispered. Our whole relationship, the words, the vows, the promises, all lies. No, Rick interrupted the girl. At first you just seemed to me a beautiful daughter of rich parents, but then I started to grow attached to you. Our long-distance relationship strengthened my feelings, and my desire to marry you was conscious, and it was based on love for you, not love for money. Why did you leave me? But we would have paid the money and lived happily ever after. When they found out I'd married a rich Otis Harris, they ran up the meter and threatened you. So I figured if I dumped you and gave them the money back, they'd calm down. So I did. I kept some of the money I took from you. I went where? To Turkey to work, said Rick with a smile. Sunny Istanbul for a while working for different companies. Now I run a European-style hotel atelier. I make good money and live well. What happened? That you finally decided to contact me. Nancy asked me a question. I missed you. Trite, but true. And there was a twinge in my chest. A couple months ago, it was like something happened to you. So while I was thinking about it, I decided to call you. It's been almost 2 months. I want to apologize to you again. I didn't want to abandon you, leave you alone, or cheat on you at all. But at the time, I felt like I had no other choice. Who's crying? Just a second. Disappeared from the camera view for a moment and returned with little Noah in her arms, who immediately calmed down in her mom's arms. Meet Rick. This is our son, who is almost 2 months old. Your son, he mumbled confusedly. How does he look like me? Except for your eyes. Yes, that's what everyone says. And I noticed it too. As soon as I saw our boy. How stupid am I? He lamented. Forgive me, Nancy, forgive me if you can. I didn't know you were in there. If I had, I would never have left you alone. I didn't know myself. I'm afraid, son, replied Rick's wife, was so heartbroken by your act that she didn't immediately realize I was delayed. You have no idea how hard it was for me. I was depressed. I had to go to a sanitarium. And all this while I was pregnant. It's a good thing it was easy. When I gave birth, I was able to come to my senses and completely dissolve in my son, forgetting about you until you called. I'm so sorry. Rick cried. I know you won't forgive me so easily, but I beg you, give me a chance to make it up to you. Come and visit me in Istanbul. I make good money. I live in a separate apartment, and I can take you and our son. I'll come. Nancy said to introduce you to my son and look into your eyes in person. The day after tomorrow, I'll write down the flight number. Don't call me yet. I'll see you later. See you later, Rick said. And he hung up. That same night, Nancy booked her tickets. The flight leaves tomorrow night. after letting her husband know what time and on what flight she would be arriving. Nancy started packing and waiting for her parents at home to break the news. After 8 o'clock, Adriana and Stephen came back to the apartment and, seeing the suitcases by the front door, immediately thought that something had happened. Camille, her daughter, called out, "Mom, please come down and explain what the suitcases are in the hallway." The head of the family shouted from the living room, "Hi, I'll run down the stairs." Through Nancy to her parents, "I just wanted to talk to you like this," said Adriana, taking hold of her heart and sitting down on the sofa. "The last time you told us the news, you were getting married. And before that, you were leaving for your lover by deception. I can't take another news like that. I'm leaving this time too." Nancy stated the fact in front of her parents. "To Turkey, and more specifically, Istanbul. And yes, I'm going with Noah. I think I'll be gone for a while." "And then what happens there?" "Where?" "Turkey," Stephen shouted. "Have you been to Georgia yet? Look how lucky your husband was to steal from you and throw you in the deep end. Do you want a repeat of the scenario?" "Daddy, don't yell." Rising to his feet, the young mother tried to calm the parent. "I'm not 10 years old to do stupid things. With a small child in my arms. I'm going to Noah's father." "Whose father? What kind of father is he?" Stephen Otis started to resent him. "Wait, how do you know he's there? He called me today and told me everything. I haven't decided if I'm gonna forgive him or not, but it's my duty to introduce my son to his real dad. You're not going anywhere. He wants money from you again. Don't argue with me, Adriana." The man turned to his wife. "Say something. Why am I the only one talking to this stupid woman?" "Stephen." The woman tried to calm her husband. "What can you do if she's so determined? Go, baby, if you think it's right. But please, look at the volumes behind the wide-open eyes without rose-colored glasses. What are you talking about?" Otis is angry at his wife. He left her, and there's no excuse or forgiveness. "I always thought his behavior was strange," sadly said Adriana. "He does not look like a man who can abandon his family. Apparently, something terrible happened, and he, being a boy, made a stupid decision." "Thank you, Mom," kissed the woman on the cheek. Nancy put her arm around her father's shoulders and ran to her son to feed him. "You really think so?" "Yes, that's exactly what I thought all along." "I'm a little shocked, of course." Taking a sip of water, the mom said, "Nancy, from our daughter's hasty decisions, but we can't stand on our own. It's her life after all. Good thing after that honeymoon trip we put a tracker in her phone." Stephen chuckled. "So we'll know where Nancy is." "Okay, so much going on in a day, I want to lie down. Can you at least tell me when your flight is?" Adriana asked, walking past the bedroom. "We'll walk you out." "Okay. Good night." Through Nancy to her parents. "Good night, sweetie," the older Otis said with glee. From the very morning, Nancy was full of energy and impatience. After all, this day promised to be the beginning of an amazing adventure for her and her son. Throughout the day, Nancy went through her suitcases, making lists of things to bring, making sure she had everything. And then the evening before her flight, she had doubts about whether she should go. But the doubt didn't last long. She looked at Noah Nancy and realized she was doing the right thing. Flying to Rick Otis drove her daughter to the airport, 300 hours before the flight. At the airport, they checked their luggage and wanted to wait for the flight with Nancy, but she asked them to go home and not worry about her. I am always on the phone reassuring Stephen and Adriana daughter until they agreed. An hour and a half later, Nancy had gone through all the necessary checks and was standing at the front desk. The smile never left her face because she felt on top of the world, holding Kucherov's angels in her arms. When they announced boarding for the flight, Nancy's heart beat faster. She felt like the heroine of a movie who was setting off to meet her dreams. "I've already forgiven him," Nancy thought. "How could I not forgive him? For I love him." In this uplifted mood and with joyful thoughts, she went up to the cabin of the airplane. The stewardesses smiled welcomingly as they helped the passengers to their seats. In the cabin, there was an atmosphere of coziness and comfort, and the view from the window on snow-white clouds only strengthened the feeling of joy and serene style. Finally, the plane took off and the journey to Istanbul began. Nancy watched the cities and fields, and then the clouds pass beneath them. And with each passing hour, her excitement grew. Nancy showed her son what was happening behind the glass, the porthole telling different stories, and when the baby fell asleep, she herself did the same. At the same time, Topaz stood in front of the mirror in his apartment and looked at his reflection, seeing in it only an image of his past life, full of mistakes and regrets. He remembered those times when everything seemed possible and simple, when it seemed that his actions would not affect his future life. But the series of decisions he had made had led to loneliness and emptiness. Now, when halfway there was his wife and son, Rick realized that all his mistakes and wrong decisions had left a deep trace in his fate. He couldn't bring back the past and fix everything, but he could start all over again with a clean slate and try to redeem himself and Nancy, whom he had hurt badly. Landing in Turkey was another unforgettable moment for Nancy. When they stepped off the plane, she and Noah were greeted by warm and sunny air filled with the scent of flowers and the sea. Everything around them was so bright and colorful that Nancy couldn't help but smile. As they entered the arrivals area and she began to look for her luggage, she felt someone's gaze on her back. Turning around, Lulu quickly found the familiar, focused look of dark eyes in the welcoming crowd. Her husband, even after a year of separation, was still the same tall, slender man with dark hair only tanned and darker. Rick moved swiftly toward his wife and son and hugged them tightly, so embraced. They stood there for several minutes, not knowing what to say to each other. They silently picked up their luggage and moved towards the exit. That's how the little journey to Istanbul began, where every day was filled with new adventures, meetings, conversations, and unforgettable experiences. Although there were many more discoveries and adventures ahead, Nancy knew that this trip would be remembered forever and would be a pivotal one in their married life. He brought the family to his apartment overlooking the Bosphorus. There he took his son in his arms, and he began to walk around happily, as if he realized that it was his father. Rick played with the baby for a long time, and Nancy silently observed this family idyll. She asked if he had somewhere to put the boy to sleep, to which Rick silently pulled out a crib from behind the screen door. The furniture was obviously new. He must have bought it. Yesterday, thought Nancy, Stella and a crib to the favorite blankets Rick's parents had given her as she put the infant to bed, pre-fed him. She and her husband went to the kitchen to talk in the Turkish man's apartment. The kitchen was not just a place to prepare food, but a cozy corner to spend warm evenings. The walls were painted a delicate shade of ivory, creating an atmosphere of warmth and tranquility. In the center of the kitchen was a large wooden table, and small chairs stood around the table. Natural wood upholstered a floral print fabric on which Nancy and Rick sat across from each other. She glanced around the walls and noticed an antique clock, which with its end reminded her of the quickness of personality and time, and the need to appreciate every moment. Next to the clock was a painting depicting a summer landscape. It added freshness and brightness to the kitchen. I wonder if he thought he had purchased it himself, or if it was already hanging here. Casting a glance at the huge old gas boiler that took up most of the kitchen, it was unkept, even shabby, and reminded Nancy of the times when whole families would gather around it to keep warm and share news. Nancy interrupted the girls' musings. Rick, thank you for your son. Thank you for keeping the pregnancy alive. I realize you could have terminated it, being full of resentment towards me. Forgive me, please. I'm so sorry. In this year, I've grown, matured both physically and mentally. On my way to you before I even got on the plane, I realized I had forgiven you the moment I decided to pick up the phone when you called on the video link. Nancy rushed over to hug and kiss his spouse. Man, I didn't even expect you to be able to forgive me. Okay, let's close this topic and discuss our future, Nancy suggested, smiling. If you are ready to build it with us, with Noah, are you still hesitating? Rick was surprised. If I wasn't ready to build my future with you, I would never call you again. And the fact that we have a son has strengthened my desire to redeem myself to you is a good thing. But how are we going to live here or go back to Moscow? I'm not ready to live here permanently. I have a couple of business ideas and a friend with whom we're preparing a startup. If everything works out, the business will be here, and I can live anywhere in the world. What's the idea? Nancy wondered. I'm not telling you yet, and I'm not taking money from you. I have yet to get back what I took from you to fully restore my trust. But I don't want to live in Moscow either. I'm sorry. The big metropolis is not for me. I propose to think and move to a place where we both will be comfortable and where Noah will have a place to run and grow up happily, exclaimed. If we live somewhere other than Moscow, then only there, where we met, where we were happy, where your homeland is, where there are boundless fields, where there are boundless landscapes, where we will be happy. Exactly. So you agree with my idea? Sure, honey, I'll go to the end of the world with you, but not to Moscow. Not Moscow, Rick laughed. I'll fly to Russia with you to talk to your parents and apologize to them. Then I'll come back to settle things. In the meantime, you choose a house in Tbilisi, where we'll move to, we'll rent, and then we'll buy our own. No, Nancy interrupted her husband's speech. We'll buy a house at once. I have money for it. I don't want to live in someone else's house and move from place to place several times. All right, if it's more convenient for you, let's do it that way. But I'll buy everything for the house. All right, as you say, conciliatory, said Nancy. And tonight we'll go for a walk. You can show me and my son all the interesting things in Istanbul. One day won't be enough for us, so we'll stay here for a couple of days. We just have to tell our parents. I'm so glad, said Rick, lifting his wife in his arms. What are you doing here? Nancy warned her parents that she would stay in Turkey for a week and then fly back with her husband. Stephen and Adriana weren't surprised, but they didn't let it show. Rick took some time off work to show all the beauties of Istanbul to his family. On the first day, they took the most popular route with a tour of the main attractions of Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. Rick chose to travel by sea streetcars along the Bosphorus Strait. When they arrived at the pier as a family, they were the ones facing a 20-minute climb through the narrow streets of old Istanbul. Better to walk to get a sense of the city's atmosphere. Nancy was convinced by her husband when he suggested walking. After the walk, the travelers found themselves in the first part of the most important square of the city, Sultan Ahmed. This part consists of small squares with fountains and is surrounded on two sides by the main sites of Istanbul, Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. The mosque made a big impression on Nancy. Rick told her that it is the first mosque in Istanbul, which is more than 400 years old, and it got its name because of the huge number of white and blue handmade pottery from Rostov. The whole family spent a long time wandering around both the temple and the mosque. Nancy had to dig around for now. Otherwise, she would not be allowed to visit the holy places. The next day, they went to Golhan Park. It is worth visiting because it is April, and this is the season of blossoms. Tulipanov told the previous night of Rick's wife. So Nancy learned that the capital of these flowers is not Holland, but Turkey. The husband knew so many interesting facts about this amazing country, which did not cease to amaze the girl. Tulips are the symbol of Turkey and favorite flower, Sultanov told, walking through the park Rick. Even the name he came up with here, and it comes from the name of the fabric for Turkish chumps. Honey, noticing the beds of roses, asked Nancy. It's not just tulips that grow in the park. How long has this park been here? It's practically the center of town. Yes, Genetsvale, taking his wife by the hand and stroking his son, who is in slang on the head, continued the story Rick Gull. KP is the oldest park in Istanbul. Look, over there is the Topkapi Palace complex. We're going there the other day, and the park was once part of the palace. The name translates into Russian as the Palace of Roses. In the spring and summer, it has over 80,000 roses in bloom, which are perfectly juxtaposed with gorgeous tulip beds. They ended their walk at the Ataturk Monument to the first president of the Turkish Republic. Their Noah's parents looked at the waves of the Bosphorus and made plans for a happy future where their family would grow. And the boy was getting brothers and sisters. During the week, Nancy saw many interesting things in Turkey. She visited many sites, among them Topkapi Palace, Süleymani Mosque, Maiden Tower, Cistern, Basilica, and many others. Before returning home, she was very nervous because she did not know how Rick's conversation with her parents would go, and more importantly, how his meeting with his parents would go. Robert was very scolding and spoke in Georgian, expressing to his son his dissatisfaction with his behavior. When they arrived in Moscow, they immediately went to Lena's apartment to meet her parents. Stephen and Adriana were already waiting for them, having sent Christopher and Molly to the birthday party of a neighbor boy. Otis, the head of the family, was very nervous and couldn't find a place to be, not knowing how to behave with a son-in-law who behaved like that. His wife told him to calm down and listen to everything Rick had to say, and only then decide whether to forgive him or not. He wanted to answer his wife, but not before the key turned in the door and they heard the familiar voice of his daughter and the shout of his grandson's shadow. A moment later, a tan Nancy appeared in the doorway, holding Noah in her arms, and behind her stood frozen in indecision Rick, holding their luggage in both hands. "Hello, daughter." Adriana broke the awkward silence. "How did you get here?" "Hi, Mom." At the parent and handing her grandchild to her, Nancy said, "We arrived well, without incident. We have a lot of news for you, and most importantly, gifts." "I can see that without incident," said Stephen contemptuously. "Everyone made it. No one got lost. No one disappeared." "Daddy Stephen," Adriana said warningly. "Hello, Rick. I'm sorry about your husband. He's very worried, as we all are, but we're ready to listen to you." "Hello," greeted the son-in-law of his wife's parents, closing the door and inviting them into the living room. "I won't talk long. There is no excuse for what I did. I know that Nancy has told you the reasons for my actions, but that in no way excuses me. I am a man, and this behavior is unbecoming." "That's a good point made by Stephen Otis. I do not even hope for your forgiveness, but I will try to restore faith in me as a worthy spouse of your daughter." Turning to his father-in-law, Rick said, "I will return all the money I stole from Nancy. Not immediately, of course, but within a year." "Mom, Dad," Nancy entered the conversation. "We decided to move to Tbilisi, buy a house and live there as a family, build our lives independently." "Wait." Dumbfounded by the news, Stephen tried to understand how it was so quickly made another decision of the daughter. "You have not had time to reconcile with him, and are already making plans for the future. But he'll give me back the money he stole. Let him be thankful I didn't report him." "And then what? How will you be alone in another country?" Adriana asked, playing with her grandson. "Who will help you?" "I'm a big girl, especially as a mom," answered Nancy. "We'll help each other, especially since Rick is about to start a small business in Turkey, and I've wanted to write books for a long time. And I've already started taking notes to write some fairy tales for children. And we won't be in Georgia." One hugged his wife by the shoulders. Marlo remarked, "My parents have settled there, who have retired and will no longer disappear on business trips. My uncle lives there, who, despite his age, will be happy to babysit his grandson. It's nature, mountain air, and my and Noah's little homeland." The conversation between Otis and Marlo continued for several more hours. With each new remark, the attitude towards Rick changed for the better. But Stephen still feared for his daughter's feelings. He suggested they draw up a prenuptial agreement, which the young parents agreed to. And Rick also offered to write a receipt that he would return the money to his wife's father. By the end of the day, the younger Otis children returned and were happy to see their sister and nephew. And little Molly was even glad to see Rick, not understanding why Christopher was staring at Nancy Marlowe's husband like that. Realizing that it was necessary to explain himself to his wife's brother as well, took him to the dining room and there told him everything he thought necessary. After hearing a lot of negativity and threats in response, Rick silently offered his hand for a handshake, and the teenager shook it, thus showing that forgiveness is possible. That same day, the man went to his parents' house to hesitate in front of the apartment that Robert, Kevin, and Miranda rented every time they stayed in Moscow. He gathered his thoughts before he pressed the bell. The door was opened by his father, and he silently disappeared into the gloom of the apartment. Rick crossed the threshold, closed the door, and followed his father. There in one of the rooms, his parents were already waiting for him. There were no hugs, caresses, and kisses from his mom, which made the young man very sad. Looking at his mother, who was crying, turning away from her son, Rick realized that she was fighting her desire to hug him. Appearing, Robert interrupted the silence. "Kevin, Ivik, and to you, hello, father. Don't you dare call me that." Order's cold tone pronounced, "Daddy Rick, after what you have done, you are not my son." Robert pleaded with the young man's mother. "You can't do that. He's the only one." "No," Miranda contradicted Robert's wife. "You can't leave your wife in a foreign country on her honeymoon. You can't steal money. You can't leave your parents. You can't disappear without giving any news. And who did that? Who violated? You can't do that much. But that's our ex-son. Father, I realize I'm to blame. Don't you understand anything?" Robert Kevin cut off his son's sentence in mid-sentence. "You're not just to blame. Rick, you've dishonored me, my mother, my wife, and subsequently your son. I didn't mean to." As the Marlowe couple's son fell to his knees and began to sob, "I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. I wanted to sort out my financial difficulties and start a new life. I thought I didn't love my wife, but I was wrong. I didn't know Nancy was pregnant. God, I didn't know anything. I didn't even realize the consequences." Son came up to Rick's mother and put her arm around his shoulders. "There in the foreign land, I felt like I was king of the world. In my life began a new chapter," continued to confess to his parents Rick. "But once the realization came that money still had to be made, and I was so smart there, I wasn't the only one who realized I had done something stupid. And when came the realization that I missed Nancy and my parents, I began to think how to reappear in your lives and how to ask for forgiveness. It should ask first of all from my wife." In a calm voice said Robert Kevin Ivik, who silently listened to the speech of his son. "If she can forgive, then the others will try." "I have already forgiven," said Miranda, wiping away her tears. "You're my son, for what it's worth. And Camille has forgiven me," Rick said quietly, "even though I don't deserve it. She's a good woman, a wonderful mother, and as you can see, a wise wife." Praised his daughter-in-law, the young man's father. "She should be memorialized. After all you've done, she was able to forgive you." "I agree." Raising his eyes to his father, Rick said, "I'll try to get your respect back. I know it's gonna be hard." "We'll see," the man said conciliatingly. "Now tell me, what are your plans with Nancy?" The next conversation with my parents took place in a more cozy family atmosphere. They sat on the sofa, and the son in the armchair opposite them. They talked about various things, but the main topic was Rick's life in Turkey and his successes. His parents asked him about his job, his family, and his future plans. He was happy to answer their questions and share his plans. A young man, and told them about their solid dreams and goals. Both Robert Kevin and Miranda were happy to hear about it. They supported him in all his endeavors and promised to help if needed. At the end of the conversation, the parents wished their son good luck and said they would always be there to help him. After the heart-to-heart talk with his parents, it was as if a stone had been removed from Rick's heart. Still, how important it is to be close to your parents. It's like you're incomplete without them, he thought on the way back to his hotel. After a couple of days, Rick had to return to Turkey to settle things, start a business with a friend, quit the hotel, rent an apartment, landlord, and send his things to Moscow. Marlowe himself moved into the hotel for the days when his presence was needed to organize the startup and initial tracking of the business. All the while, Rick missed his family madly. He was on the phone with, and many times a day, always via video call. He wanted to see both his son and his wife. Nancy, for her part, was looking for the right house for them, constantly sending options to her husband and discussing different purchase offers with her parents. Since Rick had to stay longer, he sent his wife a power of attorney to purchase the property. I drove with my father to Tbilisi to buy the dream house, leaving my son in the care of his grandmother. The cab stopped near a red brick fence, behind which you can see a house of light stone, decorated with a mosaic of multicolored from posts, which glistened in the sun and shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow. Relaxing with the driver, Nancy and her father walked to the wicket beyond which awaited them the dream house they had purchased, which still had yet to be furnished, as Stephen had not yet seen the interior decoration. The daughter had decided to show her father just after the deal was done what was in her house. The first thing the man noted was that the lot was surrounded by green hills, and in the courtyard, vines were tightly intertwined with metal structures, creating several conversations in which it would be nice to hide from the sun on a hot summer day. "Stephen, what a beautiful house. You've already seen it in pictures, haven't you?" Nancy laughed. "We've driven by it. You've looked at it a few times." "Oh, my darling. It's one thing to look at a photo and speed past it." The man smirked and took a seat on a bench in one of the great conversations. "It's another to experience this atmosphere amongst the beauty in such a distinctive country." "I agree with that. Dad, let's go inside. The view from the living room window is amazing." "Come on, you intrigue me." And father and daughter started toward the house, following the paving stones across the spacious yard. Nancy was talking nonstop about the plants growing on the property, but Stephen's attention was attracted by a small fountain, which was located in one corner of the grand palace. Stopping at it, the man listened to the book murmur, "The tea of water that gave peace and coolness." Turning toward the house, Otis saw that Camille had opened the dark wood front door with an intricately patterned door, above which hung a large wrought iron lantern. As he approached the house, he noticed two large cypress trees standing like guards on either side of the entrance, guarding the peace and comfort of the house's occupants. Inside the house, there was plenty of space and light. The large windows were decorated with carved wooden shutters. The walls were sewn with wooden panels, and the floors were laid with noble wood, which gave the building the atmosphere of an old castle with a long history. In the living room, which was the center of the first floor, there was a large fireplace made of natural stone. There were comfortable armchairs and sofas where you could relax after a long day or warm yourself on cold winter evenings. The windows near the fireplace overlooked the backyard, where a large garden with fruit trees and vineyards. Along the paths leading to the garden were wooden benches, inviting you to relax and enjoy the beauty of the surrounding nature. The house was full of light and warmth, spacious and cozy. It reminded of the traditions and customs of ancient Georgia, filling the hearts of Nancy and Stephen with the joy of harmony and hope for the marital happiness that awaited Rick and Noah. Within these walls, the daughter exclaimed with wonder at Stephen, "It's really beautiful. It's a view you just sit back and enjoy. And the whole day is not an evening." And the satisfied Nancy plumped down in the chair and offered to sit in the neighboring chair. "When I saw these landscapes that opened from the windows of the house, I was even stronger in the decision to buy it." "Did Rick see it for himself?" "No," I whispered cryptically. "I haven't even shown him a picture, in case he does not like it," surprised the girl's father. "Such a house with a view of the mountains and a huge home garden." "I doubt it." Standing up from the chair and coming close to the window, Nancy continued, "Especially since he said he trusts me completely." "That's nice. Come on, let's go and show you the second floor," Stephen Otis suggested. "Let's go." A month after buying the house, the Marlowe family moved in completely. Nancy from Moscow brought a lot of things for herself and her son, and Rick from Turkey brought a lot of original interior decorations and several carpets that decorated the living room, bedroom, and 2 children's rooms. The couple had not yet finished decorating the guest rooms, as they were in a hurry to move. They still had to completely unpack, organize the living room and kitchen, as well as fix a few benches in the yard and get a dog. Rick really liked the house his spouse had chosen. He admired the new house and felt comfortable and cozy in it. He couldn't wait to start a new life in it. Thought Rick, hugging his wife on the doorstep of their family nest. Every evening they walked around Tbilisi, spent cozy sit-downs by the fireplace, admiring their garden and rejoicing at Noah's first steps and words. Rick loved to look at his wife, shrouded in a halo of tenderness and grace. Her movements were always fluid and graceful, as if she were floating on the ground rather than walking. Hair in soft waves, not falling on her shoulders, dwarfed the face, emphasizing its refined features. Eyes deep and penetrating looked at her son with kindness and wisdom. Around Nancy hovered an atmosphere of calmness and peace, as if the wife was a source of light and warmth for all who were near. Her presence made Tamara and Noah feel cozy and safe, and they felt protected and happy. Nancy felt strange and couldn't tell if it was from the euphoria and happiness from the move, or was it health-related. After sending her husband and son for a walk, she had taken a pregnancy test and was now sitting on the couch with her eyes wide open in surprise, holding the positive pregnancy test in her hands, and her heart was racing. She couldn't believe it. After all, they hadn't planned to have another baby so soon. But the news was unexpected and at the same time very joyful. After all, the dreams of a big family were becoming a reality. She felt overwhelmed with happiness and excitement for how Rick would react to the news. Going for a walk, father and son decided to have a great time. Rick is tall, slender, and was dressed in lightweight long pants and a shirt. And Noah, small and energetic, was in bright shorts and a t-shirt with the image of his favorite cartoon character. They stepped out of the house, and a world full of possibilities and adventure opened up before them. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the scent of flowers and herbs. The father was telling his son about the different things that surrounded them. The 1-year-old didn't understand everything, but he enjoyed every moment with his dad. Rick showed Noah trees, flowers, and birds, and explained how they lived and what they did. As they walked, they came to a park where there were many playgrounds and rides. There they enjoyed riding on the slides and swings. The father watched his son with a smile on his face, delighted with his happiness and energy. Eventually, the evening was coming to an end, and they returned home, tired but happy. This walk was a special memory for them that Rick will hold in his heart for the rest of his life. Upon returning home, Rick noticed his wife's nervousness and her desire to hide from him. But while she fed her son and put him to bed, he decided not to broach the subject. Rick's parents were happy. "And now we have to go." Getting up from the chair, said Robert. "Kevin Iovich. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Dad and Mom said goodbye. Nancy, escorting her husband's parents to the door. Rick escorted the guests out. Coming. Called back the spouse from the kitchen on New Year's Eve. All Otis and Senior Marlowe came over for the holiday long weekend, Kaline and Rick. They decorated a large Christmas tree in the backyard with colorful balls, garland, and tinsel. On top of it was a bright star that sparkled against the dark sky. The tree was decorated with great taste and love. Each element of decoration was carefully selected and harmoniously combined with the rest. The balls were of different sizes and colors, from small, silver to large golden garlands glowed with multicolored lights, creating an atmosphere of festivity and magic. The meeting of the new year was stormy and joyful. Everyone was happy. Everyone was playing and wanted to rest not only their bodies but also their souls, which they did very well. 3 months after the new year, the first cry of Etteri Marlowe, whom her parents were waiting for, was heard in the Tbilisi maternity hospital. They had long ago decorated the second nursery, decorating it in a delicate pink light. Fairy tale characters and beautiful flowers were drawn on the walls. In the corner of the room stood a small white crib decorated with lace and bows. Next to the crib was a nightstand, on which there were soft toys and rattles. The floor was covered with a fluffy carpet, so that the baby could crawl and play on it in the future, and on the window hung curtains of transparent fabric, through which the sunlight penetrated, making the room even more cozy. When night came, the stars lit up the dark sky. The young family gathered around the cradle of their newborn baby. They looked at him with love and tenderness, as if he were the most precious treasure in the world. As they lifted little Noah up and introduced him to his sister, Nancy, and Rick could not be overjoyed at their happiness. The room was quiet, with only the sleeping baby's quiet breathing barely audible to the young parents. The parents smiled as they looked at Eteri and hugged their eldest son tightly. They knew that their love and care would protect them from all the troubles and dangers that might come their way. So they stood with their lives bent over the cradle and looked at their little miracle that had brought so much joy and happiness into their lives. They realized that their lives would now be filled with new worries and joys, but they were ready for it. After all, what could be better than loving and caring for their babies? Darling. Setting his son down on the floor and taking his hand, Rick spoke on his way to the older child's room. I'm so excited to get to see the first few months of our daughter's life. I'm glad to have you around this time too. Nancy hugged her husband. I can't stop berating myself for abandoning you then, leaving you in that position, forcing you to make the difficult decision to carry alone, to give birth without your husband, putting you to sleep. Noah kept whispering to his wife, Rick, I will never get tired of apologizing to you. Don't. Covering the door to his son's room, he snuggled into his husband's chest. Nancy, don't take old wounds. It's all in the past. Now you're around, and we're happy. Yes, we are happy, and we always will be. Rick gave his wife a big, tight hug. So idyllically, they went to their room 40 days after the baby girl was born. Under the roof of Nancy and Rick's house, a noisy crowd of relatives and close friends had gathered for Eteri's viewing party. The girl's parents invited all their near and dear ones to share the joy and show off their dark-haired and black-eyed and beautiful baby girl. The living room was decorated with balloons and garlands. Soft, quiet music was playing in the background, and a rich table was set in the center with vases of flowers in addition to food. Next to the fireplace was the small round crib where Terry also slept, snug in a soft blanket tied by her grandmother, Adriana. The guests approached the crib quietly, almost silently, to look at the baby and wish her health and happiness. They each brought a gift of a toy, clothes, books, or money. Nancy and Rick were happy to have such a celebration to share their joy with their loved ones and create memories that would be cherished for a lifetime. Thus began a new, but by no means the last chapter in the life of Nancy, Rick, Noah, and Eteri. The young couple's dream of a large family didn't remain just a dream. 7 children were born into their family. Rick worked tirelessly, developing Turkish business and opening branches in Russia. Nancy wrote fairy tales for children, which were so well liked by one publishing house that it signed a contract with her and began to publish them in impressive editions. The children grew up to the delight of their parents. They were friendly and loved each other. On all holidays in their house gathered a noisy crowd, where everyone was a relative or close friend. Each year, the number of people invited grew. Christopher got married, grew older. Molly changed boyfriends often, looking for her man. Lisa married and had 2 children. And Stephen and Adriana Otis unexpectedly had John. And all of them, the friendly Marlowe family, was always a pleasure to have in our home.